Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. I'm Leah, 34. The moon above Ozark National Forest split in half. I didn't notice it at first. We just arrived at our campsite off Highway 7, near the Rotary Ann Trailhead in Arkansas, and I was too busy leveling the RV to pay attention to the sky. My husband, Derek, was already complaining about the Wi-Fi situation, which I'd warned him about 3 times before we left Little Rock. Our daughter, Maisie, who'd just turned 7, was pressing her nose against the window, fogging up the glass as she stared into the darkening woods. "Mom, can I go explore?" "Not until we're set up, baby," I called back, wrestling with the stabilizer jacks. The RV was a rental, a 32-foot Class A that Derek had insisted we needed for our big family adventure. It smelled like industrial cleaner and someone else's life, and the engine had made a concerning grinding noise for the last 20 miles. But Derek had been talking about this trip for months, ever since his promotion at the insurance firm. Quality family time, he'd said, reconnecting with nature, getting away from screens. I should have known better. Derek hadn't been camping since he was a kid, and even then it was at some resort campground with hot showers and a camp store. This was different. This was real wilderness. The Ozarks in late October, when the tourist season was winding down and the locals started whispering about things that came out when the leaves fell. The ranger at the check-in station had given us a strange look when Derek mentioned we'd be staying at Site 17, the one farthest from the main road. "You folks sure about that one?" he'd asked, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Tends to be pretty isolated out there. Cell service is non-existent, and we don't patrol that far back after dark." Derek had laughed it off, clapping the old man on the shoulder. "That's exactly what we're looking for, peace and quiet." The ranger had nodded slowly, but I'd caught the way his eyes lingered on Maisie, something almost sad in his expression. "Just make sure you keep that little one close after sunset. Woods can be confusing in the dark." Now, as I finished with the stabilizers and straightened up, my lower back protesting, I understood what he meant. The forest pressed in from all sides, a wall of pine and oak that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The trees were old here, thick-trunked and gnarled, their branches interlocking overhead like arthritic fingers. The clearing where we'd parked was barely large enough for the RV and the picnic table, and already the shadows were lengthening, reaching toward us with something that felt almost deliberate. "Derek, can you get the hookups while I start dinner?" I asked, opening the RV door. The hinges squealed, the sound sharp and wrong in the heavy silence of the woods. That's when I noticed the quiet. No birdsong. No rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant murmur of a creek we'd passed on the way in. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the blood rushing in your ears. "Mommy, look at the moon." Maisie's voice pulled me back. I turned to see her pointing through the windshield, her small hand pressed flat against the glass. I followed her gaze and felt something cold settle in my stomach. The moon was rising through the trees, fuller and brighter than I'd expected. But it wasn't the size that made me stare. It was the shape. The moon hung there, impossibly large, and directly through its center ran a dark line, perfectly straight, dividing it into 2 equal halves, like someone had taken a ruler and drawn through it with black ink. "That's weird," Derek said, coming up behind me. He squinted at it, then shrugged. "Probably just clouds or something." But there were no clouds. The sky was crystalline clear, already darkening to deep purple at the edges. And the line through the moon didn't waver or shift like a cloud would. It was solid, absolute, wrong. "I don't like it," Maisie whispered. "It's just a trick of the light, sweetie," I said, though my voice sounded unconvincing even to myself. "Come on, let's get dinner started." We went through the motions of setting up camp, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Derek struggled with the water hookup, cursing under his breath as he tried to thread the hose. Maisie sat at the picnic table, unusually quiet, her coloring book open but her crayons untouched, and I kept glancing at the moon, watching as it climbed higher, the impossible divide growing more pronounced as the sky darkened. By the time we sat down to eat, hot dogs and canned beans heated on the RV's propane stove, full night had fallen. The moon hung overhead like a severed eye, casting double shadows that seemed to fall in the wrong directions. Everything it touched looked subtly wrong, colors muted and textures flattened, as if we were looking at the world through old glass. "This place gives me the creeps," Derek admitted, poking at his hot dog. "I mean, it's nice and all, but it's really isolated." "You picked it," I reminded him, though I agreed. The darkness beyond our small island of light felt alive somehow, watching and waiting. Maisie hadn't touched her food. She sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the trees. "There's someone out there," she said quietly. Derek and I both turned to look. The forest was a solid wall of black, our lantern light barely penetrating the first layer of trees. "It's just shadows, baby," Derek said, but I heard the uncertainty in his voice. "No," Maisie insisted. She pointed toward a gap between two large oaks. "Right there. They're watching us." I stared until my eyes watered, but I couldn't see anything. Just darkness and the faint glimmer of moonlight on leaves. "There's nobody there, Maisie. We're alone out here." "We're not alone," she whispered, and something in her voice made the hair on my arm stand up. Derek cleared his throat. "Okay, that's enough spooky talk. How about we roast some marshmallows and then head inside? Early start tomorrow. We're going to hike that trail to the waterfall." We tried to make it normal, to pretend that everything was fine. Derek built a fire in the metal ring, and we huddled around it, roasting marshmallows that tasted like smoke and ash. But the fire didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The flames cast wild, leaping shadows that made the trees seem to move. And beyond the circle of firelight, the darkness felt heavier, more present. And the moon kept rising, that dark line through its center now so pronounced it looked like the moon might split apart completely. The light it cast was cold and red-tinged, and where it touched the ground, I swore I could see frost forming, crystalline patterns spreading across the dirt like veins. "Derek, do you see that?" I pointed at the ground near his feet. He looked down, frowned. "Is that ice? It's not that cold." But it was getting colder. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees since sunset, and our breath was starting to fog. Derek went to get jackets from the RV, and I pulled Maisie closer, wrapping my arms around her. She was trembling, though I didn't think it was entirely from the cold. "Mommy, I really don't like this place." "I know, baby. Tomorrow we'll—" I stopped. In the distance, maybe a quarter-mile away, I'd heard something. A long, drawn-out sound that might have been wind through rock formations, except it sounded almost like breathing. Deep, labored breathing, as if something massive was inhaling and exhaling in the darkness. Derek came back with the jackets, and I decided not to mention what I'd heard. We were all on edge, and I didn't want to make things worse. We put Maisie to bed in the RV's rear bedroom, and Derek and I sat up front, speaking in low voices so we wouldn't disturb her. "Maybe we should leave in the morning," I suggested. "Find a campground closer to civilization." Derek nodded, surprising me. "Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. Something feels wrong." We sat in silence for a moment, and then Derek pointed at the moon through the windshield. "You know what that reminds me of? There's this old Ozark legend my grandfather used to tell, about how the devil tried to eat the moon once, got halfway through before God stopped him, left his teeth marks forever." "That's disturbing," I said. "Yeah, he had a lot of disturbing stories. Used to say these mountains were old, older than they had any right to be. Said things lived here that predated humans, things that didn't take kindly to intruders." "Well, you're really selling this place," I muttered, but I felt uneasy. The breathing sound came again, closer this time, and Derek heard it too. His hand found mine in the darkness. "Probably just wind," he said. "Probably," I agreed, not believing it. We decided to turn in early, though neither of us felt tired. The RV's bedroom was cramped, barely enough room for the full-sized bed, and through the window above our heads the moon watched with its terrible, divided face. I tried to close the curtain, but the thin fabric did nothing to block out that red-tinged light. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when Maisie's scream woke me. Derek and I bolted upright, tangled in sheets, and rushed to her room. She was sitting up in bed, pointing at the window. "There's someone outside. They were looking at me." I went to the window, pressed my face against the glass. The moon was directly overhead now, and its light painted everything in shades of red and black. I could see the picnic table, the dead fire ring, the wall of trees beyond. And there, just at the edge of the clearing, something moved. It was too dark to make out details, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving in a way that didn't quite match human locomotion. It paused, and I had the horrible impression that it was looking back at me, though I couldn't see its face. "Derek," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. He came up behind me, and together we watched as the shape retreated into the trees. Not walking, sliding almost, as if its feet didn't quite touch the ground. "What the hell was that?" Derek breathed. "I don't know." My hands were shaking. "We're leaving. Right now. I don't care what time it is." Derek nodded, already moving toward the driver's seat. "Get Maisie dressed. We're getting out of here." But when Derek turned the key, the engine clicked once and died. He tried again. Click. Nothing. "No, no, no," Derek muttered, pumping the gas pedal. "Come on, you piece of shit." I climbed into the passenger seat, Maisie clutched in my arms. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. The engine won't turn over." Derek was sweating now, despite the cold. He tried the lights. Nothing. The battery was completely dead. "How is that possible? It was fine when we got here." "I don't know." Derek's voice was rising, panic edging in. "The battery was brand new. It shouldn't—" A sound interrupted him, a tapping on the side of the RV. Soft at first, almost polite, then harder, more insistent. Tap, 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 tap. We froze, staring at each other in the dim emergency light that had kicked on automatically. The tapping continued, moving along the side of the RV from back to front. Methodical, deliberate. "Don't open the door," I whispered. The tapping stopped at the driver's side window, right next to Derek's head. We both turned to look, though every instinct screamed not to. In the red moonlight we could see a hand pressed against the glass. Too long, fingers stretching impossibly far, nails like blackened claws. The flesh was pale, almost translucent, and through it I could see the dark shapes of bones. Derek made a sound in his throat, something between a whimper and a gag. The hand moved, drawing something on the window. A circle, then a line through the middle. The symbol burned into the condensation, glowing faintly red. Then the hand was gone, and we heard footsteps, if they could be called that, circling the RV. Not the sound of feet on dirt, but something softer, wetter, like bare flesh dragging across mud. Maisie had her face buried in my shoulder, and I could feel her silent tears soaking through my shirt. I held her tighter, trying to control my own breathing. The thing, whatever it was, circled the RV 3 times, and each time it passed the windows, that horrible dragging sound made my skin crawl. Finally, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. We waited, frozen, for something to happen. Minutes passed. 5. 10. Nothing. "Maybe it's gone," Derek whispered. As if in response, the RV suddenly shook, a violent jolt that threw us from our seats. Maisie screamed. The shaking continued, rhythmic, as if something massive was pushing against the vehicle from multiple sides. The stabilizer jacks groaned, metal shrieking. "Hold on!" Derek yelled, grabbing the steering wheel even though the engine was dead. The shaking intensified, and I heard something crack, one of the jacks breaking. The RV tilted, and everything not secured went sliding. Dishes crashed in the kitchen. The TV tore loose from its mount. I wrapped myself around Maisie as we tumbled into the stairwell, and then it stopped. The RV settled with a groan, listing at an angle, but stable. In the new silence, I could hear all 3 of us breathing hard, hearts racing. "Is everyone okay?" Derek asked. "I think so," I managed. Maisie was crying now, loud sobs that she couldn't control. "Shh, baby, it's okay. We're okay." But we weren't okay. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere with something outside that wanted— what? To kill us? To play with us? I didn't know, and I didn't want to find out. Derek pulled out his phone, but as expected, there was no signal. He'd brought a CB radio, thankfully, and he dug it out of the storage compartment, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "This is an emergency," he said into the receiver. "We're at Site 17 in Ozark National Forest, and we need help immediately. Something is attacking our RV. Does anyone copy?" Static. He tried again, varying the frequency. Nothing but white noise and occasional pops. "Why isn't this working?" Derek's voice cracked. Someone should be monitoring emergency channels. I was staring out the window, watching the moon. As I looked, another thin line appeared across it, perpendicular to the first. Now the moon was divided into quarters, and the light coming through was even stranger, casting everything in overlapping shadows that moved independently of each other. "Derek," I said quietly, "look at the moon." He glanced up and went pale. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know, but we can't stay here." I stood up carefully, testing the tilted floor. "We need to walk out. It's 3 miles back to the main road? In the dark? With that thing out there?" Derek gestured at the windows. "We don't have a choice. The RV's dead, the radio doesn't work, and sitting here isn't going to—" A face appeared in the window beside me. I screamed, stumbling backward. It was there for only a second before disappearing, but that second burned itself into my brain. Pale skin stretched too tight over wrong bones, eyes that were too large and completely black, a mouth that opened too wide, revealing teeth like broken glass. "Oh, God," Derek whispered. "Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God." Maisie had stopped crying. She was staring at nothing, her face blank with shock. I gathered her up again, and she came willingly but lifelessly like a doll. "We need to barricade ourselves," I said, forcing myself to think practically. "Push furniture against the doors. Cover the windows. We wait for daylight, and then we run." Derek nodded, moving mechanically. Together, we shoved the dinette table against the entry door, wedged the couch against the emergency exit. I pulled down all the window shades, hung blankets over them for good measure. It made the RV's interior even darker, but I preferred not seeing what was outside. We huddled together in the sleeping area, as far from the windows as possible. Derek had found a tire iron in the storage compartment and held it across his knees like a sword. I had a kitchen knife, though I had no idea if it would do any good against whatever was out there. The hours crawled by. Outside we heard sounds, dragging, scraping, breathing, sometimes tapping, sometimes scratching. Once, something heavy landed on the roof and we heard footsteps, or the approximation of footsteps, moving from end to end above our heads. But it didn't try to get in. Whatever it was, it seemed content to circle, to watch, to wait. Around what must have been 3 in the morning, Maisie finally spoke. Her voice was small and distant. "They're not human." "I know, baby," I whispered. "They've been here a long time, since before there were trees. They're old and they're hungry and they want—" She stopped, her eyes focusing on something I couldn't see. "They want us to come outside." "How do you know that?" Derek asked, his voice tight. Maisie didn't answer. She was staring at the covered window, her expression blank. "They're showing me things. In my head. They're showing me how they used to be before the moon broke. They were beautiful once." "Maisie, stop it," I said, shaking her gently. "Don't listen to them." "But they're so sad, Mommy. They've been alone for so long." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "They just want friends. They want us to stay. Forever." Derek stood up, the tire iron gripped so hard his knuckles were white. "Something's wrong with her. We need to get her out of here now." "The second the sun comes up," I promised. "The absolute second." But dawn seemed impossibly far away. The night stretched and warped, minutes becoming hours, and through it all, the things outside continued their patient vigil. I tried counting seconds to track time, but I kept losing count. my mind drifting into strange, half-waking dreams where the moon spoke in my mother's voice and the trees reached down to stroke my hair. Derek dozed off sometime around 4, his head dropping to his chest, though he kept his death grip on the tire iron. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face in the window, those black eyes staring into me. And I heard breathing that didn't come from Derek or Maisie, a third respiration that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Maisie stayed awake too. We sat together in the darkness, her hand in mine, both of us listening to the things outside. At some point, she started humming. It took me a moment to recognize the tune, a lullaby I used to sing to her when she was a baby. But something about it was wrong. The notes were slightly off, the rhythm disturbed, as if she was learning it from memory, but the memory was corrupted. "Maisie, stop," I whispered. She did, but she turned to look at me with eyes that reflected the red moonlight even though all the shades were drawn. "They like that song," she said. "It reminds them of before." "Before what?" "Before the moon broke. Before they got hungry." She tilted her head, and the gesture was all wrong, too angular, too sharp. "They say the moon will keep breaking until there's nothing left, and when it's gone completely, they can finally come out fully. Right now, they can only be half here." "You're scaring me," I admitted. "They want me to tell you something, Mommy." Her voice was still her own, but there was something underneath it, something older and colder. "They want you to know that you can't leave. The forest won't let you. The path only goes deeper now." I wanted to shake her, to snap her out of whatever trance had taken hold, but I was afraid that if I looked too closely, I'd see something other than my daughter looking back. Derek jerked awake suddenly, gasping. "I dreamed—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I dreamed we were already dead, that we'd been dead since we arrived and the whole night was just our last moment stretched out forever." "It was just a dream," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Was it?" He looked around the darkened RV. "How do we know this is real? How do we know we're not—" "Stop," I said firmly. "Don't think like that. We stay focused, stay rational." But rationality felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. The world inside the RV had taken on a dreamlike quality, edges blurring, time losing meaning. I checked my watch and found it had stopped at 11:47, the exact time we'd first noticed the split moon. Finally, after an eternity, I saw a gray light starting to seep around the edges of the window shades. Dawn. I had never been so grateful to see morning in my entire life. "Okay," I said, standing up and immediately regretting it as my cramped muscles screamed. "It's light. We're getting out of here." Derek nodded, moving to the door. Together we shifted the table away, our movements careful and quiet, as if we might wake something. When the door was clear, Derek paused with his hand on the handle. "On 3, he whispered. "We run for the main road. Don't stop, don't look back, don't—" The door exploded inward, torn from its hinges. Derek flew backward, slamming into the kitchen counter, and in the doorway, silhouetted against the gray dawn, stood something that might once have been human. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body stretched and distorted as if someone had grabbed it by the head and feet and pulled. Its skin was that same translucent white, and through it I could see organs that pulsed wrong, bones that bent at strange angles. Its face was the worst, features melted and reformed, eyes that were pits of absolute darkness, a mouth that unhinged like a snake's. It stepped into the RV, and the vehicle groaned under its weight. When it spoke, the sound came not from its mouth but from everywhere at once, a vibration in my bones. "Stay." I grabbed Maisie and ran for the emergency exit, not thinking, just moving on pure instinct. My hands found the latch, yanked it open, and we tumbled out into the gray morning. The clearing looked different in daylight. The trees were closer than they'd been the night before, their branches reaching over the RV like grasping hands. The ground was covered in frost, but not normal frost. This was formed in patterns, spirals, and symbols that hurt to look at directly. And there were more of them. At least a dozen of the tall, stretched things standing in a circle around the campsite. Waiting. Behind me, I heard Derek scream. I wanted to go back for him, but Maisie's hand in mine and the wall of creatures between us made that impossible. So I ran. I ran into the forest, crashing through underbrush, Maisie keeping pace beside me. Behind us, Derek's screams cut off abruptly, replaced by sounds I don't want to remember. The trees seemed to grab at us, branches catching our clothes and hair. The path, there had been a path, I knew there had been, was gone, replaced by dense, impassable forest. We pushed through anyway, thorns tearing at our skin, roots trying to trip us. I don't know how long we ran. Time felt wrong here. Elastic. We might have been running for minutes or hours. The gray light never brightened, stuck in that eternal pre-dawn moment. And behind us, I could hear them coming. Not running. They didn't need to run. They moved through the forest like water flowing between trees, always just out of sight, but always there. Maisie stumbled and I pulled her up, but she fought me. "Mommy, stop. Please stop." "We can't stop, baby. We have to. They're everywhere. There's nowhere to go." She was crying again, but her tears were wrong, too thick, almost black. "They showed me, Mommy. They showed me what happens to people who run. It's worse. So much worse." "I don't care," I gasped, dragging her forward. "We're not giving up. We're—" The forest ended abruptly and we tumbled out into a clearing. For a moment my heart soared. We'd made it. We'd found the road. But then I realized where we were. It was our campsite. The same clearing, the same tilted RV with its door hanging open, the same circle of frozen ground. We'd run in a complete circle. I fell to my knees, pulling Maisie against me. This couldn't be happening. We'd run in a straight line. I'd been watching the moss on the trees, using it to navigate north. We should have reached the road. "The path only goes deeper now," Maisie whispered, repeating what she'd said earlier. "They told me. The forest changes when the moon breaks. The paths all lead to the same place, wherever they want you to be." The creatures emerged from the trees, their circle tightening. In the gray light I could see them more clearly, and I wished I couldn't. They were like moths pinned to a board, human forms stretched and preserved in some terrible parody of life. Some wore the remnants of clothing, decades or centuries old. Others had been here so long they'd started to merge with the forest itself, bark growing from skin, roots emerging from feet. One of them stepped forward and I recognized the clothing, Derek's jacket, his jeans. But the thing wearing them was no longer my husband. It stood with that same wrong posture, head tilted at an impossible angle, and when it opened its mouth, Derek's voice came out but layered with that bone-deep vibration. "Stay with us. Be with us. It's better here. No pain, no fear, just the waiting and the watching and the—" "No," I said, standing up. I put Maisie behind me, even though I knew it was useless. "No, we're leaving. You can't keep us here." The Derek thing laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Can't we? Look at the moon." I did, though I didn't want to. The moon was still visible in the gray sky, but now it was quartered again, and then again, dividing and subdividing like cells. 8 sections, 16, 32. Each division creating more of that red-tinged light, more shadows that fell in wrong directions. "When the moon is dust," the Derek thing said, "we'll be whole again, and so will you. No more running, no more fear, just peace in the changing." I felt it then, pulling at me, a terrible gravity, like hooks in my chest, drawing me toward them, toward the circle, toward transformation into something that would stand in these woods forever, waiting and watching and hungering. Maisie's hand slipped from mine. I turned to see her walking toward them, her movements dreamlike, and I lunged, grabbed her, pulled her back. "No, Maisie, fight it." But she wasn't fighting. She was smiling, and the smile was too wide, too knowing. "It's okay, Mommy. They showed me. It doesn't hurt after the first part. And then we'll be together forever. You and me and Daddy. Forever and ever." "That's not your father," I said, shaking her. "Maisie, listen to me. That's not—" But she wasn't listening. She pulled free and walked into the circle, and the creatures closed around her like water. I screamed, running after her, but hands, too many hands, too long, too cold, grabbed me, held me back. I watched as they lifted my daughter, passed her between them like a cherished toy. And as they touched her, she changed. Her skin paling, her limbs elongating, her eyes darkening from brown to black. She looked back at me once, and her expression was ecstatic, transcendent. "Come with us, Mommy," she called, and her voice had that terrible vibration underneath it now. "It's so beautiful here. You can finally rest." I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was watching my daughter transform into something I didn't recognize, and the next I was running again. Not toward the path, there was no path, but just away, into the densest part of the forest where even the gray light couldn't penetrate. Branches whipped my face. Thorns tore my clothes. I fell and got up and fell again. And all the while I could hear them behind me, calling in that layered voice that used my daughter's words and my husband's tone and something ancient and hungry underneath it all. I don't know how I found the road. Maybe I didn't find it at all. Maybe it found me. But suddenly I was stumbling onto gravel, my feet on solid ground, and there was a car coming, headlights cutting through the gray. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms, screaming. The car, an old pickup truck, screeched to a halt, and a man jumped out, his face alarmed. "Jesus Christ, lady, are you okay? What happened?" I couldn't form words. I just pointed back at the forest, and he followed my gaze. The trees stood silent and still, innocent in the pre-dawn light. No creatures, no stretched shadows. Just a normal Arkansas forest. There was my husband, my daughter, I couldn't explain. How could I explain? The man helped me into his truck, and as we drove toward the ranger station, I looked back at the forest. Standing at the tree line, just barely visible, I saw them. Maisie and Derek, holding hands, watching me go. They raised their free hands in unison, waving goodbye. And behind them, dissolving into the gray light, dozens more. Hundreds, maybe. All the people who'd never left these woods. All the people who'd chosen, or been chosen, to stay. The ranger station was chaos. They organized a search party immediately, insisted I go to the hospital, but I told them about Site 17, about the RV. They found it eventually, exactly where I'd left it. The door torn off, signs of violence inside. But no bodies, no blood, just frost in strange patterns and symbols carved into every surface. They searched for 3 days, brought in dogs, helicopters, volunteers, but Derek and Maisie were gone, like they'd never existed at all. The investigators questioned me, their skepticism growing more pronounced with each retelling. Eventually, they started asking if I'd hurt them myself, if I was having a breakdown. I stopped talking after that. Let them think what they wanted. They released me after a week, when the search was officially called off. I went back to Little Rock to our empty house and tried to figure out how to explain to our families what had happened. But there were no words. The truth sounded like madness, and lies felt obscene. It's been 3 months now. Winter has settled over Arkansas, and every night I look at the moon. It hasn't split again, not visibly anyway. But sometimes when the light hits it just right, I can see the lines, faint, almost invisible, but there, dividing and subdividing, preparing for something. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear them calling. Maisie's voice through the walls, Derek's whisper in the basement, telling me how beautiful it is, how peaceful, how I can finally rest if I just come back. I know I'll go eventually. The pull is getting stronger, that terrible gravity in my chest. Every day I find myself thinking about the Ozarks, about Site 17, about the gray light and the patient circle of watchers. Every night the dreams are more vivid, more real. And yesterday I noticed something. When I looked in the mirror, my reflection smiled a beat too late. My eyes, just for a second, were darker than they should be. They showed me what happens to people who run, Maisie had said. It's worse, so much worse. She was right. Running didn't save me. It just delayed the inevitable. Because once the forest has you, once those creatures show you what waits in the changing, A part of you stays with them forever, and eventually that part calls the rest of you home. I'm writing this as a warning, though I don't know who will read it. Don't go to Site 17 in Ozark National Forest. Don't stay anywhere too remote when the moon rises full in October. And if you see the moon split, if you see that impossible line dividing light from light, run. Run, and don't stop running, and pray that the path leads somewhere other than back. But mostly, I'm writing this because I need to record what happened. I need someone to know that Derek and Maisie were real, that they existed, that what happened to them wasn't normal, that the thing I saw in my daughter's place at the end wasn't my daughter, no matter how much it smiled with her mouth. The moon is rising now. I can feel it, even with my curtains drawn. Another night of their voices, growing louder, more insistent. Another night of watching my reflection to make sure it still moves when I do. I give it a week, maybe 2. Then I'll wake up one morning with dirt under my nails and frost on my skin, and I'll know it's time to go home. Back to the forest, back to the circle, back to where they're waiting with patient, hungry love. And maybe that's okay. Maybe Maisie was right. Maybe it really is beautiful, in its own terrible way. Maybe transformation is just another word for peace. But I doubt it. I think what's waiting in those woods is something older and colder than love. Something that wears human shapes the way we wear clothes. I think the moon is breaking, because something on the other side is pushing through, and when it finally shatters completely, what comes out will make those stretched, pale watchers look like mercy. But I'll find out soon enough. We all will, eventually. The moon keeps dividing, night after night, and the red light keeps spreading, and one day it'll split into so many pieces that darkness pours through the cracks. And then there won't be anywhere left to run. The whole world will be Site 17, and the forest will be everywhere, and we'll all have a choice between staying and changing or running forever through trees that only lead home. I know what I'll choose. I already chose it. That moment I looked back and saw my daughter waving. Part of me stayed with her then, and the rest is just catching up. So if you're reading this, understand. I'm not missing. I know exactly where I am. I'm in the space between the moon's divisions, in the gray light before dawn, in the clearing that only exists when you're looking for a way out. I'm home. And soon, so will you be. Story 2. I'm Jacob. I'm 34. The lake at Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness was warm as skin. That should have been my first warning, but I was too caught up in the excitement of finally taking this trip with my younger brother Marcus and his girlfriend Tessa. We'd driven our rented RV from Minneapolis, winding through northern Minnesota's dense forests until we reached this isolated stretch of wilderness near the Canadian border. It was late September, and the aspens had turned golden, their leaves trembling in the cold wind that swept down from Lake Superior. But when I dipped my hand into the water at our campsite on Moose Lake, expecting the shock of autumn cold, the liquid wrapped around my fingers like bathwater, like something alive and fevered. "That's weird," I said, pulling my hand back and wiping it on my jeans. The water left a faint film on my skin, slightly oily. Marcus was already unloading our gear from the RV, his muscular frame making quick work of the coolers and camping equipment. At 28, he was 6 years younger than me, and we'd grown closer since our mother's death 2 years ago. This trip was supposed to be a bonding experience, a chance to reconnect away from the demands of our jobs and the lingering grief that still colored our family gatherings. "What's weird?" he called over, dropping a tent bag on the ground. "The water. It's warm. Really warm." Tessa emerged from the RV, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her athletic build evident in her hiking clothes. She'd been dating Marcus for 8 months, and I'd liked her immediately. She was sharp, funny, and didn't take any of Marcus's bullshit. She worked as a nurse at Abbott Northwestern, and she had this practical, no-nonsense energy that balanced out Marcus's sometimes impulsive nature. "Maybe it's a hot spring or something," she suggested, walking over to join me at the water's edge. "In Minnesota?" I shook my head. "I don't think so, and it doesn't smell like sulfur." She knelt down and touched the water herself, then jerked her hand back. "Jesus, that's not right. That's like body temperature. Marcus joined us, squinting out at the lake. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the overcast sky like dark glass. No ripples, no movement. Not even insects skimming the surface. "Could be runoff from somewhere," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe there's a mill or something upstream." "There's nothing upstream," I said. "We're at the edge of the wilderness area. That's the whole point. No development, no industry. Just forest and lakes for miles." The three of us stood there for a moment, staring at the water. The silence was absolute. No birds calling, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just the whisper of wind through the aspens and the occasional creak of branches. "Well, I'm not swimming in it," Tessa said finally, standing up and brushing dirt from her knees. "But let's not let it ruin the trip. We've got 3 days here, and I've been looking forward to this for weeks." She was right. We'd planned this trip for months, coordinating our schedules and saving up money. The Boundary Waters was supposed to be pristine, untouched wilderness, one of the most remote and beautiful places in the lower 48. A few hours of weird water shouldn't derail everything. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting up camp. The RV was parked in a small clearing about 50 yards from the lake, surrounded by white pines and paper birch. We set up a tent for extra storage and sleeping space. Marcus and Tessa would take the RV's bed, and I'd sleep in the tent with my German shepherd, Kodiak, who'd been content to explore the perimeter of our campsite, his nose to the ground. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest, I started a fire in the metal ring. The wood was dry and caught easily, but as the flames grew, I noticed something odd. The fire burned with a faint blue tinge at its base, and the smoke had an acrid smell that made my eyes water. "Did you use lighter fluid?" Marcus asked, settling into one of our camping chairs with a beer. "No, just paper and kindling." Tessa wrinkled her nose. "What's that smell?" "I don't know." I poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. The blue color deepened for a moment, then faded back to normal orange and yellow flames. "Maybe the wood's treated with something?" "We gathered it from the forest," Marcus pointed out. "It's not like it came from Home Depot." He was right, but I couldn't shake the unease settling in my gut. The warm water, the unnatural silence, the strange fire. Individually, these things might be explainable. Together, they felt like warnings. Kodiak suddenly stopped his exploration and came to sit beside me, pressing his body against my leg. His ears were up, alert, and he was staring intently at the tree line beyond our campsite. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I put my hand on his head, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Probably just a deer or something," Marcus said, but he was looking in the same direction, his posture stiffening. We sat in silence, watching the shadows deepen between the trees. The sun had dropped below the horizon, and the forest was filling with that peculiar twilight gloom that made everything look slightly unreal. I couldn't see anything moving out there, but Kodiak remained tense, his growl continuing as a low, steady vibration. Then, just at the edge of the firelight's reach, I saw it. A figure standing between 2 birch trees, completely motionless. It looked like a person, tall and thin, but something about its proportions was wrong. The arms were too long, hanging down past where the knees should be, and the head seemed to tilt at an angle that made my stomach turn. "Do you see that?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "See what?" Tessa leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. "There, between those 2 white trees. Something's standing there." Marcus stood up slowly, his hand moving to the hunting knife on his belt. "I don't see anything, man," but even as he said it, the figure moved. Not walked, moved. It shifted several feet to the left in a single instant, like a skip in a video. Now it was partially obscured by a pine tree, but I could still see that elongated silhouette, and what might have been a face turned in our direction. Kodiak's growl turned into a sharp bark, and he lunged forward, straining toward the tree line. I grabbed his collar, holding him back. "Easy, boy, easy." "Jacob, you're freaking us out," Tessa said, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. "What did you see?" "I don't know, but something's out there, something watching us." Marcus grabbed the heavy maglite from the RV and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the forest. The light illuminated trunks and branches, ferns and fallen logs, but nothing that looked like the figure I'd seen. The forest looked completely empty, completely normal. "There's nothing there," Marcus said, but he kept the light moving, checking and rechecking the shadows. "Maybe we should sleep in the RV tonight," Tessa suggested. "All of us, just to be safe." I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't imagining things, but the words died in my throat. Maybe I had imagined it. The long drive, the stress of taking time off work, the lingering grief. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but Kodiak was still alert, still staring at the forest with every muscle tensed. "Yeah," I said finally. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea." We retreated into the RV, Kodiak included, and locked the door behind us. Marcus kept the mag light close, and I noticed Tessa checking that her phone had signal. 2 bars, barely enough, but it was something. The RV suddenly felt very small, very fragile, with its thin aluminum walls and flimsy door lock. "This is stupid," Marcus said, trying for a laugh. "We're letting ourselves get spooked by nothing. It's just the woods. It's just nature. Nature with body temperature water and blue fire," I said. "Okay, so maybe there's some geological explanation we don't know about. Maybe there's a thermal vent or something. That doesn't mean we're in danger." But even as he said it, we all heard the sound, a scraping noise on the outside of the RV, like nails or claws dragging along the metal siding. Slow, deliberate, moving from the back toward the front. We froze. Kodiak's growl returned, deeper now, more menacing. The scraping continued, reaching the front of the RV and then stopping directly beside the door. We could hear breathing on the other side, or what sounded like breathing. A wet, rattling sound that didn't quite match the rhythm of human respiration. "Who's there?" Marcus called out, his voice stronger than I would have expected. He had the knife in his hand now, the blade catching the light from the RV's interior. No answer. Just that breathing, and now a new sound, a tapping on the door. Not a knock, but something arrhythmic and wrong, like fingers that didn't quite know how to form a fist. Tessa grabbed my arm, her nails digging in through my shirt. "Don't open it," she whispered. "Please don't open it." The tapping continued for another 30 seconds, then stopped. The breathing faded away. We sat in absolute silence, straining to hear any movement outside. The fire we'd left burning cast flickering shadows through the RV's windows, making everything inside shift and dance. "It's gone," Marcus said after several minutes had passed. "Whatever it was. If there was anything," I added, but I didn't believe it. We'd all heard it, all felt it. We tried to settle in for the night, but sleep was impossible. Marcus and Tessa took the bed in the back, and I stretched out on the fold-down couch with Kodiak pressed against my side. Every small sound from outside made us tense. Branches breaking, wind in the trees, the distant call of what might have been an owl. Or might have been something else entirely. Around 2 in the morning, I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. My dreams were fractured and strange, filled with images of the lake, its water rising and rising until it surrounded the RV, until we were drowning in that warm, oily liquid. I dreamed of the figure in the trees, but now I could see its face, or the place where a face should be. Just smooth, pale skin stretched over bone, with 2 dark pits where eyes belonged. I woke with a start to find dawn light filtering through the windows. My shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold morning air, and my mouth tasted like copper. Kodiak was awake too, sitting up and watching the door with unwavering attention. Marcus emerged from the back, looking as haggard as I felt. "Did you sleep?" "Barely. You?" "No." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Tessa's still out, though. I don't know how she does it." We opened the door carefully, half expecting something to be waiting outside, but the campsite looked normal in the morning light. The fire had burned down to ash, and our gear was exactly where we'd left it. The only unusual thing was a set of tracks in the soft dirt near the RV, impressions that looked almost human but with too many toes, 7 or 8 on each foot, splayed out like fingers. What the hell made those? Marcus knelt down to examine them more closely. "I don't want to know." The tracks led from the forest to the RV, then circled the vehicle several times before heading back into the trees. Following them with my eyes, I saw they disappeared into the shadows about 20 yards away, right where I'd seen the figure the night before. "We should leave," I said. "Pack up and go." Marcus looked up at me and I could see the conflict in his expression. Part of him wanted to agree, wanted to run, but another part, the stubborn, proud part that had made him a high school football star and a successful salesman, refused to be scared off. "We just got here," he said. "We paid for the campsite for 3 nights. And it's the Boundary Waters, Jacob. What's going to happen to us here?" "Something already did happen. You heard it last night. You saw these tracks. So there's an animal around. A bear, maybe, or a moose. They can make weird sounds. Those aren't bear tracks, and I don't know what they are, but I'm not letting some weird footprints ruin our trip. We'll be more careful. Keep the fire going all night. Stay together. It'll be fine." I wanted to argue more, but Tessa emerged from the RV at that moment, stretching and yawning. "Morning," she said cheerfully. "God, I slept like the dead. What are you two doing?" Marcus stood up quickly, blocking her view of the tracks. "Just checking out the area. You want coffee? I'll get the stove going." We fell into the routine of a camping morning. Coffee brewing, breakfast cooking, the sun climbing higher through the trees. In the daylight, with Tessa's cheerful energy and Marcus's determined normalcy, the previous night's terror seemed almost silly. Almost. But the lake was still warm. When I went down to fill a pot with water for dishes, the temperature was exactly the same as it had been yesterday. 98 degrees, I guessed. Exactly body temperature. And when I looked out across the water, I saw something that made my breath catch. There were shapes in the lake, human shapes, or what looked like them, suspended just beneath the surface. I counted 5. No. 7. No. More than that. They were everywhere, scattered across the visible portion of the lake, all floating at the same depth, maybe 3 or 4 feet down. Their arms and legs were spread wide, their faces turned upward, and they were completely motionless. "Marcus," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Marcus, come look at this." He jogged down to join me, Tessa following behind. When they saw what I was pointing at, they both went still. "Are those people?" Tessa's voice was barely audible. "They can't be," Marcus said. "They're not moving at all. They'd have to be." "Dead," I finished. "They'd have to be dead." We stood there for a long moment trying to process what we were seeing. The shapes didn't move, didn't float, didn't decay. They just hung there in the warm water, suspended like specimens in formaldehyde. "We need to call someone," Tessa said, pulling out her phone. "The rangers, the police, someone." But when she checked her phone, the signal that had been there last night was gone. No bars at all. Marcus checked his phone. Then I checked mine. Nothing. We were completely cut off. "The ranger station," I said. "It's about 10 miles back the way we came. One of us could drive there, report this." "We should all go," Tessa said. "Right now. This isn't safe." Marcus was still staring at the lake, his face pale. "Those bodies, they're not decomposing. They should be floating, bloated. They should look, I don't know, worse, but they just look like they're sleeping." He was right. Even from shore, I could see that the bodies looked fresh, preserved. Their skin was pale but intact, their hair floating in halos around their heads. And now that I looked more carefully, I realized something else. They were all positioned identically, arms out at their sides, legs slightly spread, faces up, like they'd been arranged that way. Placed. "We're leaving," I said firmly. "Get in the RV. Now." This time, Marcus didn't argue. We moved quickly, throwing our gear into the RV without bothering to organize it properly. Tessa climbed into the passenger seat while Marcus got behind the wheel. I loaded Kodiak into the back and was reaching for the door when I heard it. Singing. High and sweet, like a child's voice coming from the direction of the lake. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream." I turned slowly. Standing at the water's edge was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She wore a white dress that was too clean, too bright. Her blonde hair hung in perfect ringlets. She was singing and staring directly at me with eyes that were entirely black. No whites, no irises, just solid black from lid to lid. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. "Jacob, get in," Marcus was shouting from the driver's seat, the engine already running. The girl smiled, revealing too many teeth. Rows and rows of them, sharp and small like a shark's. She lifted one arm and pointed at me, her finger extending longer and longer, the bone popping and cracking as it grew. I threw myself into the RV and slammed the door. "Go! Go!" Marcus hit the gas and we lurched forward, the RV bouncing wildly over the rough ground. Through the back window I could see the girl still standing there, still pointing, her mouth open in that terrible smile. And behind her, shapes were rising from the lake. Those suspended bodies pulling themselves upright, water streaming from their hair and clothes as they began to walk toward shore. The RV hit the main trail and Marcus pushed it faster, the vehicle shaking and groaning. Trees whipped past on either side, branches scraping the roof. Tessa was gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles were white, and Kodiak was barking frantically, sensing our terror. "What the fuck was that?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What the fuck was that?" "Just drive," Tessa said. "Just get us out of here." But as we rounded a bend, Marcus slammed on the brakes. The trail ahead was blocked, not by a fallen tree or a natural obstacle, but by people. Dozens of them, standing shoulder to shoulder across the path, completely motionless. They were all wearing old-fashioned clothes, dresses and suits from decades ago, maybe longer. And they were all watching us with those same black eyes. "Back up," I said. "Back up, back up." Marcus threw the RV into reverse, but when we turned around, there were more of them behind us now. They hadn't been there 30 seconds ago, but now they filled the trail, blocking our escape. We were surrounded. The figures began to walk toward us, moving in perfect unison. Their faces were expressionless, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes being pulled by invisible strings. As they got closer, I could see that their skin had the same pale, preserved quality as the bodies in the lake. These weren't living people. They couldn't be. "What do we do?" Tessa's voice was high with panic. "Marcus, what do we do?" "The forest," I said. "We can't stay on the trail. Go through the trees." Marcus didn't hesitate. He yanked the wheel hard to the right and gunned the engine, sending the RV crashing through the underbrush. Branches shattered against the windshield and the whole vehicle tilted dangerously as we hit uneven ground. Something scraped along the bottom with a sound like tearing metal, but Marcus kept going, weaving between larger trees, the RV's suspension screaming. Behind us I could see the figures giving chase, but they moved in that same strange, stuttering way. Here, then 3 feet to the left, then 6 feet forward, skipping through space instead of actually running. And they were gaining on us. One of them appeared directly in front of the RV, and Marcus couldn't swerve in time. We hit it with a sickening thud, and the thing exploded like a water balloon, drenching the windshield with that warm, oily liquid from the lake. Marcus hit the wipers, smearing it across the glass, and for a moment we couldn't see anything. When the windshield cleared, we were in a different part of the forest. The trees here were older, more twisted, their branches forming a canopy so thick that almost no light reached the ground. The RV's headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a forest floor that was wrong. The ground was moving, writhing, covered in something that looked like exposed muscle tissue, pulsing with arterial rhythm. "This isn't real," Tessa was saying over and over. "This isn't real. This can't be real." But it was real. The RV's tires were leaving tracks in that living ground, tracks that filled with clear fluid that might have been lymph or plasma. The trees around us were breathing, their trunks expanding and contracting. And ahead, I could see an opening in the canopy where something massive was waiting. It looked like a person, but only in the way that a child's drawing looks like a person. It had the right number of limbs, the right general shape, but everything was slightly wrong. Too tall, too thin, joints bending in directions they shouldn't. Its face was a flat plane with features that seemed to shift and rearrange as I looked at them. And it was huge, maybe 20 feet tall, standing in a clearing that shouldn't exist. The thing opened its mouth, a vertical slit that ran from where its chin should be to what might have been a forehead, and sound poured out. Not words, not music, but something that made my ears ring and my vision blur. The RV's engine began to sputter and die, all the electronics flickering. "No, no, no, come on!" Marcus was pumping the gas, turning the key, but the RV was shutting down. We rolled to a stop maybe 50 yards from the creature, and suddenly we were sitting in silence broken only by that terrible sound. Then it stopped. The creature closed its mouth and tilted its head, regarding us with what might have been curiosity. Behind us, I could hear the rustling of the other figures approaching through the trees. We were trapped. "The tent," I said suddenly. "There's a machete in the gear, and flares. If we can get to them—" "That thing is 20 feet tall," Marcus said flatly. "What's a machete going to do?" "I don't know, but we can't just sit here." Tessa was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "My mom," she whispered. "I didn't tell my mom I loved her before we left. I was mad at her about something stupid, and I didn't." "You're going to tell her," I said, gripping her shoulder. "We're getting out of this." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The creature was moving toward us now, each step making the ground shudder. Those other figures were closing in from behind. And the lake, I was certain now that the lake was the center of this, whatever this was. The warm water, the preserved bodies, this impossible forest. It was all connected. Kodiak suddenly barked and lunged at the RV's door, his paws scratching at the handle. He looked back at me, whined, then barked again. "He wants out," Marcus said. "He's smarter than us. Maybe we should follow his lead." "Out where? To that thing?" But Kodiak barked again, more insistent, and I realized he wasn't looking at the creature. He was looking to the right, into the shadows between the trees. And there, barely visible, I saw what might have been a path, not a human-made trail, but a natural opening in the underbrush, winding away from the clearing. "There," I pointed. "You see it?" Marcus squinted. "Maybe. It could be a path, or it could be nothing. It's something," Tessa said, wiping her eyes. "It has to be something, because I am not staying here." We made our decision in an instant. Marcus grabbed the keys and his knife. Tessa took her phone, useless as it was. I slung my backpack over my shoulder. It had water, a first aid kit, a compass, and a lighter. We opened the door and ran. The creature screamed as soon as we emerged, that same reality-bending sound that made my teeth ache and my stomach heave. But we were already moving, Kodiak leading the way toward the gap in the trees. Behind us, I could hear the squelch of the creature's feet on that living ground, moving impossibly fast for something so large. We crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at our clothes and faces. The path was barely there, maybe just an animal trail, but we followed it because there was nothing else to follow. Kodiak ran ahead, his natural instincts guiding him better than our human panic. The forest changed as we ran. The breathing trees gave way to normal pines and birch, and the ground beneath our feet became solid again. We burst out of the shadows into an area of the woods that looked almost ordinary, and there, sitting in a small clearing, was a cabin. It was old, maybe a century or more, built from rough-hewn logs that had weathered to gray. The windows were dark and moss grew thick on the roof, but it was shelter, and shelter was all that mattered. We reached the door, and Marcus threw his weight against it. The old wood held for a moment, then splintered inward. We tumbled inside with Kodiak, and Marcus immediately started dragging a heavy table toward the door to barricade it. The cabin's interior was a single room with a stone fireplace, a few pieces of rotting furniture, and walls covered in something that looked like writing. Scratched into the logs with a knife or nail, hundreds of words and phrases covered every available surface. "Don't go to the lake," I read aloud. "The water calls, but don't listen. They're not dead, they're waiting. It's been here longer than the trees, longer than the stones. It makes you see wrong, makes you think wrong. 23 days and still it won't let me leave." Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed, looking around at the walls. Someone was trapped here. Someone documented all of this. Tessa had found a journal on the floor, its pages yellowed and warped. She opened it carefully and began to read. This is dated 1987, a man named Carl Hendricks. He was a surveyor working for the state. He came to map this area and… Oh God. What? I moved to look over her shoulder. He says the lake is alive. Not has something alive in it. Is alive. He says it's some kind of organism that's been here for thousands of years, maybe longer. It mimics human form to attract prey, keeps the bodies preserved in its water to use as puppets. He says it spreads through the groundwater, that the whole area is infected. That's insane, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I gestured to the door, where we could hear heavy footsteps approaching. After what we just saw, the footsteps stopped outside the cabin. We held our breath, weapons ready. Marcus with his knife, me with a rusted axe I'd found in the corner. Kodiak growled low, his hackles raised. Then something spoke. Not the creature from the clearing, but a voice I recognized. It was my mother's voice, speaking words she'd said to me at her deathbed. Jacob, honey, don't be afraid. Death is just another room you walk into. Come on out, come see me. My legs nearly buckled. Marcus grabbed my arm, his face pale. That's not her. That's not Mom. I know. But hearing her voice, twisted and used by whatever was out there, broke something inside me. Tears blurred my vision. The voice changed, became Marcus's. Tessa, baby, I'm hurt. Please help me. Please come out here. Tessa pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head. No, that's not him. He's right here. The real Marcus was beside her, his jaw clenched. Ignore it. Whatever it is, it's just trying to trick us. But the voices continued, cycling through every person we'd ever loved, every fear we'd ever had. They spoke in perfect mimicry, saying things only the real people would know. My father, dead 10 years, telling me he was proud of me. Tessa's best friend from college, reminding her of a secret they'd sworn never to tell. On and on, a parade of ghosts and memories weaponized against us. The journal had more. I forced myself to keep reading while the voices clawed at our sanity. Carl Hendricks had spent 3 weeks in this cabin, trapped by the same entities we were fleeing. He'd survived by staying inside during the day and only venturing out at night when the things seemed less active. He'd tried to leave a dozen times, but the forest always changed, paths leading him back to the cabin or to the lake. In the end, he'd made a desperate decision. He'd set fire to the forest, hoping that destroying the vegetation would somehow hurt the organism. The last entry was dated August 7th, 1987. I can see the flames spreading. It's screaming. The whole forest is screaming. I don't know if I'll make it out, but maybe this will stop it. Maybe this will kill… The entry ended there, the final letters trailing off into an illegible scrawl. Fire, I said. He tried to use fire. Marcus looked at me. We don't have enough fuel to burn down a forest. No, but we have flares. And if that thing is really an organism, if it's really all connected, maybe we can hurt it enough to get away. It was a desperate plan, maybe a stupid one, but desperation was all we had left. I dug through my backpack and found 3 road flares, their red, waxy bodies feeling absurdly mundane after everything we'd witnessed. When we run, we go straight, I said. Don't follow any paths. Don't trust anything that looks familiar. Due east, following the compass. 10 miles that way should put us near the highway. Should, Tessa repeated. Should isn't good enough. It's all we have. We waited until the voices outside subsided, replaced by that eerie silence we'd come to dread. Then, moving as quietly as possible, we opened the cabin door and slipped out. The forest was dark now, though I had no idea how much time had passed. Hours, days. The journal had mentioned time working strangely here, and I could believe it. My watch had stopped at 8:47, though I couldn't remember seeing it frozen before. We lit the flares and threw them in different directions, watching as the chemical fire caught on dry brush and began to spread. The flames were intensely bright in the darkness, and within minutes we could see smoke rising. The forest responded immediately. The trees began to writhe, their branches thrashing like arms in pain. The ground beneath us heaved and buckled, and that terrible sound, the creature's scream, echoed from everywhere at once, but we were already running, compass in hand, crashing through underbrush that seemed to grab at our ankles and trip us at every step. Behind us, the fire spread faster than it should have, as if the organism was actually flammable, as if every tree and plant was soaked in some kind of accelerant. The heat was intense, and smoke began to fill the air, making us cough and our eyes stream. Something grabbed Tessa's ankle and she went down hard. Marcus and I both turned back, and I saw what had caught her. A root, but one that was actively moving, coiling around her leg like a snake. Marcus hacked at it with his knife, and the root released her with a sound like a human scream. We pulled her up and kept running, the fire at our backs growing into an inferno. The smoke was so thick now I could barely see Marcus running beside me, could barely make out Kodiak's form ahead. My lungs burned, and every breath was agony. Then, suddenly, we broke through the trees onto a paved road. The highway. We'd found the highway. Behind us, the forest was a wall of flame, and we could hear things dying in that fire, screaming and shrieking and making sounds that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. But ahead of us, in the distance, I could see headlights approaching. We stumbled into the middle of the road, waving our arms, and a semi-truck air-braked to a stop. The driver, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a weathered face, stared at us in shock. "What in God's name?" "Please," Tessa gasped. "Please just get us out of here." The driver looked from us to the burning forest, her expression hardening. "Get in. Quick." We climbed into the cab, Kodiak included, and the truck roared away from that place. I looked back through the window and saw the fire spreading, consuming acre after acre. And for just a moment, I thought I saw something massive moving through the flames, something 20 feet tall with too many joints, burning but not dying, screaming its rage at the sky. The driver didn't ask questions, just drove. She took us to the nearest town, a place called Ely, where we stumbled into the police station and tried to explain what had happened. The cops didn't believe us, of course. They checked on the fire. It was real enough, eventually consuming nearly 500 acres before the Forest Service got it under control. But when they went looking for the cabin Carl Hendricks had described, they found nothing. No structure, no journal, no evidence anyone had ever been there. The RV was never found. Neither were the bodies in the lake. When officials investigated Moose Lake after the fire, they found it completely normal. Cold water, healthy fish population, no anomalies, no bodies suspended beneath the surface, no organisms. Nothing. They ruled it all a result of stress and dehydration, possible carbon monoxide poisoning from our stove, mass hallucination. We were given medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and ultimately told we were lucky to have survived the forest fire we'd accidentally started. But I know what I saw. Marcus knows. Tessa knows. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that child's voice singing, "Row, row, row your boat." Sometimes I wake up to find my sheets damp, and the water smells faintly oily, feels slightly too warm. The doctors say it's night sweats, anxiety, trauma responses. They've given me pills that help me sleep, therapy sessions that help me cope. Marcus and Tessa have been getting treatment too, though Marcus and I don't talk about it much. Tessa broke up with him 3 weeks after we got back. She couldn't look at him without seeing that thing wearing his face, hearing its voice say things the real Marcus would say. It's been 4 months now since that trip. Winter has come to Minnesota, and snow covers the boundary waters. The lake will be frozen over, the forest dormant. But I know it's still there, still waiting. The fire hurt it, maybe even set it back, but it didn't kill it. Nothing we could do would kill something that old, that patient. Sometimes I think about Carl Hendricks, about what happened to him after he set that fire in 1987. His body was never found either. Maybe he got away, like we did. Maybe he's out there somewhere, trying to forget, taking pills to sleep, seeing therapists who don't believe him. Or maybe he's still there, suspended in that warm water, preserved and waiting, his body a puppet for something that wears human skin like a costume. I don't camp anymore. I don't go near lakes. And on days when I touch water and it feels too warm, feels like skin temperature, I pull my hand back and remember. The lake at Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness was warm as skin. And somewhere it still is. Story 3. I'm Sophia, 34. The air at Devil's Backbone Wilderness, Texas, chanted my name. I heard it first on the third night when the mesquite trees bent low under a wind that shouldn't have existed. My name, whispered in a chorus of voices that sounded like children, like old women, like something trying very hard to sound human. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the syllables, Sophia, Sophia, Sophia. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, when the air was just air, and Devil's Backbone was just a name on a map. The RV had been Marcus's idea. My husband of 6 years, always the optimist, always the one pushing for adventure when I wanted to stay home with a book and a glass of wine. We need this, he'd said, standing in our kitchen in Austin with a brochure for Devil's Backbone Wilderness spread across the counter. Just you, me, and 2 weeks of nothing but stars and silence. I'd wanted to say no. Work had been crushing me. Graphic design deadlines, clients who changed their minds every 5 minutes, the endless grind of freelance life. But Marcus had that look in his eyes, that puppy dog hopefulness that I could never resist. And truthfully, the idea of disconnecting from everything did hold some appeal. Fine, I'd said. But if there's no cell service, you're dealing with any emergencies. He'd laughed and kissed my forehead. There won't be any emergencies. It's just camping, Soph. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, as I sit here in what's left of our RV, with the dawn light finally breaking through the twisted trees outside, I can still hear my name in the wind. Sophia, Sophia. Like a question, like an accusation, like a claim. We arrived at Devil's Backbone on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-October. The drive from Austin had taken just under 2 hours, winding through the hill country until we reached the trailhead and the designated RV camping area. It wasn't a national park, more of a state wilderness area, rugged and less developed than the tourist spots. That had been part of the appeal for Marcus. No crowds, he'd said, just us and nature. The campground was empty when we pulled in. Not unusual for a Tuesday in October, the ranger had told us when we checked in at the small station near the entrance. A weathered man in his 60s named Dale, with skin like old leather and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. You folks planning to stay the full 2 weeks? He'd asked, glancing at our reservation. That's the plan, Marcus had said, grinning. Dale had nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Well, you picked a quiet time. Might not see another soul while you're here. Weather's supposed to hold, though we might get some wind. Always get wind out here this time of year. Sounds perfect, I'd said, though something in Dale's tone had made my stomach tighten slightly. He'd handed us a map and an information sheet. Campground rules are pretty simple. No open fires outside designated rings. Keep your food locked up. We got coyotes, sometimes mountain lions. Stay on marked trails if you're hiking. And he'd paused, his finger tapping the counter. If you hear anything strange at night, anything that don't sound right, stay in your RV. Don't go investigating. Marcus had laughed. Like what? Ghost stories? Dale hadn't laughed back. Just stay inside if things sound off. That's all. We'd driven to our spot, site number 7, at the far end of the campground loop, backed up against a dense wall of juniper and live oak. The isolation was immediate and absolute. The nearest campsite was at least 200 yards away, and beyond our little clearing, the wilderness pressed in on all sides. It's perfect, Marcus had said, already climbing out of the RV to start setting up. I'd looked at the trees, at the way they seemed to lean inward, and felt that tightness in my stomach again. But I'd pushed it down. It was just camping, just nature. Just 2 weeks away from deadlines and traffic and the constant buzz of city life. Just camping. The first 2 days were exactly what Marcus had promised. We hiked the nearby trails, cooked simple meals on the RV's stove, sat outside as the sun set, and watched the sky turn impossible shades of orange and purple. The stars at night were brilliant, undimmed by city lights, and the silence was so complete it almost hurt my ears. Almost. Because even then, I noticed things. Small things. The way the wind seemed to blow from different directions simultaneously, making the trees sway in conflicting patterns. The way birds would go silent all at once, as if someone had flipped a switch. The way Marcus's coffee tasted wrong both mornings, like the water itself had changed flavor overnight. "It's just well water," Marcus had said when I mentioned it. "Different minerals than what we're used to." But it wasn't that. The taste was almost organic, like the water had been filtered through something living, something that had left a trace of itself behind. On the third day, Marcus wanted to hike to the overlook. According to the map, it was a 5-mile trail that ended at a limestone cliff with views across the entire wilderness area. We packed water, snacks, and set out mid-morning. The trail was well marked at first, following a dry creek bed before climbing up through juniper brakes and patches of prickly pear. The October sun was warm, but not oppressive, and despite my lingering unease, I found myself relaxing into the rhythm of walking, the simple pleasure of physical exertion. We were about 3 miles in when we saw the deer. It was standing directly in the middle of the trail, maybe 30 yards ahead. A doe, medium-sized, with a coat that looked almost reddish in the dappled sunlight. Nothing unusual about that. We'd seen plenty of deer in the area already, but this one wasn't moving. It was just standing there, facing us, completely still. "Look at that," Marcus whispered, reaching for his phone to take a picture. I stared at the deer, at the way it stood, at the way it wasn't looking away, wasn't showing any sign of fear or flight instinct. Its eyes were fixed on us, dark and unblinking. "Something's wrong with it," I said. "What do you mean?" It's not acting normal." Marcus lowered his phone slightly. "It's just a deer, Soph." But it wasn't just a deer. I could feel it in my bones, in some primal part of my brain that still remembered when humans were prey. This deer was wrong. We stood there for maybe 3 minutes, the deer and us, locked in some kind of silent standoff. Then Marcus took a step forward, and the deer's head tilted. Not the way an animal's head tilts. This was mechanical, wrong, like a puppet on strings. Its neck bent at an angle that made my stomach lurch. "Marcus, don't." But he took another step, and the deer's mouth opened. Wide. Wider than should have been possible, the jaw unhinging like a snake's. And from that impossible mouth came a sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. My name. Sophia. Not in the deer's voice. Deer don't have voices. In a human voice. A woman's voice, breathy and intimate, like someone whispering in your ear in the dark. Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale. "What the fuck?" The deer's mouth closed, its head straightened, and then it simply walked off the trail and into the brush, moving with perfect natural deer movements as if nothing had happened. We stood there, both of us breathing hard, both of us trying to process what we'd just seen. "Did that—" Marcus's voice was shaky. "Did that thing just say your name?" "Yes." That's not possible." I know. We stood there for another minute, maybe 2. Then Marcus said, "We should go back." I didn't argue. The hike back seemed to take forever. Every sound made us jump. Every rustle in the brush, every bird call, every crack of a twig. The forest that had seemed merely isolated before now felt malevolent. Watching. Waiting. When we finally emerged back at the campground, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. The RV looked almost absurdly normal sitting there, our camping chairs still arranged around the fire ring, a dish towel hanging from the door handle. "We're leaving," I said as soon as we got inside. "Tomorrow morning. First thing." Marcus nodded, his face still pale. "Yeah, okay, yeah." But even as he said it, I saw doubt creep into his eyes. But maybe, it was probably just some kind of animal mimicry thing. Parrots can talk, right? Maybe there's some kind of bird that wasn't a bird, Marcus. I know, but you saw what I saw. That deer opened its mouth and said my name, in a human voice. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stressed. I know. I'm trying to make sense of it. We can make sense of it from Austin. Let's just pack up and go." But we didn't pack up. Not then, because the sun was setting, and the idea of driving those winding roads in the dark suddenly seemed worse than staying put. We convinced ourselves, or Marcus convinced me, or I let myself be convinced, that we'd be safe in the RV for one more night, that we'd leave at first light. That was our first mistake. Night fell fast in the wilderness. One moment there was twilight, purple and soft, and the next it was full dark. The kind of darkness that city people forget exists. We didn't light a fire. We stayed inside the RV with the doors locked and the curtains drawn, eating a cold dinner of sandwiches and chips, neither of us talking much. Around 9 o'clock the wind started. It came from nowhere, going from dead calm to a sustained howl in a matter of seconds. The RV rocked on its suspension and the trees outside thrashed and groaned. I'd heard hill country wind before, but this was different. This had a voice in it, a keening quality that made my teeth ache. And underneath the wind, I heard it. My name. Sophia. 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 Not just one voice now. Many voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, all chanting in unison, rising and falling with the gusts. Child voices, old voices, male and female, all blending together into a chorus that came from everywhere and nowhere. Marcus heard it too. I could see it in the way his eyes widened, the way his knuckles went white, gripping the edge of the small dining table. "What the fuck is that?" he whispered. "I don't know. Sophia. Sophia. Sophia." The chanting continued for hours. Not constantly. It would rise with the wind, fade when the wind dropped, then come back stronger. Always my name. Never Marcus's. Just mine. Over and over, like a prayer or a summoning. We huddled together on the small couch at the back of the RV, neither of us sleeping, both of us staring at the curtained windows and waiting for something to happen. For something to scratch at the door, to try to get in. But nothing did. The wind chanted my name, the RV rocked, and we waited in terror until finally, around 3 in the morning, the wind died as suddenly as it had started. The silence afterward was almost worse than the sound had been. We must have dozed off sometime before dawn, because I woke to sunlight streaming through a gap in the curtains and Marcus snoring softly beside me. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then I saw his face, still pale even in sleep, saw the dark circles under his eyes, and knew it had been real. I got up carefully, trying not to wake him, and went to the window. Pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The campsite looked exactly the same. Our chairs, our fire ring, the trees. Normal. Peaceful. Morning birds were singing. A squirrel ran across the clearing. But the trees, I stared at the trees, trying to figure out what was different about them. Then I realized they'd moved. Not much, maybe only a few feet, but the way they ringed our clearing had changed. Trees that had been 5 yards from the RV were now 3 yards away. The gap we'd driven through to reach our site seemed narrower. Trees don't move, I told myself. You're tired. You're scared. You're seeing things. But I knew what I was seeing. The wilderness had crept closer while we slept. Marcus woke up a few minutes later. His first words were, "We're leaving, right now." I nodded. "I'll make coffee. You get everything secured." But when he went to start the RV's engine, nothing happened. Not even a click. The battery was completely dead. "That's impossible," Marcus said, staring at the dashboard. "I just had this battery checked before we left. It was brand new." He spent the next hour trying everything. Checking connections, testing with a multimeter he'd packed, attempting to jump-start from the house batteries. Nothing worked. The engine battery was dead, and the house batteries, which should have been fully charged from our solar panels, were also drained to nothing. Something drained them, Marcus finally said, sitting back on his heels in front of the open engine compartment. Overnight, something drained all our batteries completely. What could do that? He shook his head. I don't know. A short, maybe, but I can't find one. This doesn't make sense. We stood there in the morning sunlight staring at our dead RV, both of us understanding what this meant. We were stuck. Miles from the nearest town, no cell service with a vehicle that wouldn't start and no way to call for help. "We walk out," I said. "We hike back to the ranger station. It's only a few miles. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, okay, let's pack some water and go. We gathered supplies, water bottles, snacks, our phones even though they were useless, a flashlight, a knife. Marcus wrote a note and left it on the RV's dashboard in case anyone came looking for us. RV won't start. Gone to get help. Back soon. We set out toward the main road around 10 in the morning, following the campground loop toward the exit. We walked for 2 hours before we realized something was wrong. The campground loop should have been maybe a mile, maximum. A simple circuit that would take us back to the entrance road, which we could then follow to the ranger station. But we kept walking, and the loop kept going, winding through the trees in a path that felt increasingly wrong. This isn't right, Marcus said, stopping to check the map for the 3rd time. We should have reached the exit by now. I looked around. The trees were denser here, more juniper than oak, and they all seemed to lean inward, creating a canopy that blocked out much of the sky. I couldn't see any other campsites, couldn't see the main road, couldn't see anything but trees and more trees. Maybe we took a wrong turn, I said, though I didn't believe it. We'd been following the road the entire time, following the painted markers on the trees. There weren't any turns to take, Marcus said. His voice was tight with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. It's a loop. One road. How the fuck do you get lost on a loop? We kept walking. Another hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher, then started to descend. We drank our water, ate our snacks, and still the road wound on. The trees pressed close, and we saw nothing but wilderness. Around 4 in the afternoon, we came around a bend and saw our RV. We both stopped dead, staring at it. Our RV sitting in our campsite, with our chairs arranged around the fire ring and Marcus's note still visible through the windshield. No, Marcus said. No, that's not possible. We've been walking away from it for hours. But there it was. We checked the license plate, looked inside. It was definitely ours. Somehow, impossibly, after 6 hours of walking in, what should have been a straight line away from this spot, we'd ended up exactly where we'd started. I felt something break inside me then. Some fundamental understanding of how the world worked, how space and distance operated. We'd walked in a straight line. We hadn't turned around. We hadn't gotten confused. The road had simply looped back. The ranger, I said. My voice sounded strange, high and thin. The ranger said to stay inside if things sounded wrong. Maybe he knows what's happening. Maybe this happens here. Radio, Marcus said suddenly. The RV has a CB radio. I never set it up, but maybe we can reach someone. We practically ran inside. The RV felt different now. Not safe, not like a sanctuary, but like a cage. The walls pressed in. The air smelled wrong, organic and thick. Marcus dug through the storage compartment until he found the CB radio we'd bought but never installed. He spent the next hour hooking it up to the house batteries, which had somehow, impossibly, partially recharged. When he finally got it working, he keyed the mic. Hello. This is Campsite 7 at Devil's Backbone. Does anyone copy? We need help. Our vehicle won't start and we're experiencing some kind of navigation issue. Hello? Static. Nothing but static. He tried different channels, called out again and again. Finally, on channel 19, someone answered. But it wasn't the ranger's voice. It wasn't any voice I'd ever heard. It was my voice, coming through the speaker, saying my own name. Sophia. 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 Marcus dropped the mic like it had burned him. The voice continued, chanting my name through the static, growing louder and louder until it was a scream, until it distorted the speaker and made the entire radio shake. Then it cut off. The silence was absolute. That night was worse than the first. The wind started earlier, around sunset, and it was stronger. The RV rocked violently, and I was genuinely afraid it might tip over. But worse than the wind was the chanting. My name, over and over. But now it wasn't just in the wind. It was in the walls of the RV. It was in the floor. It was in the metal frame and the plastic fixtures and the fabric of the curtains. Everything vibrated with it, Everything resonated with those syllables. Sophia, Sophia, Sophia. Marcus held me, both of us shaking, both of us crying without shame now. The terror had gone beyond pride, beyond trying to be strong. We were breaking, hour by hour, our minds struggling to cope with a reality that didn't follow any rules we understood. Around midnight, the scratching started. Something outside the RV. Something with claws or nails, dragging them along the aluminum siding. Long, slow scratches, moving from the front of the RV toward the back, then starting again. Over, and mixed with the scratching I could hear breathing. Wet, rattling breathing, like something with fluid in its lungs. "Don't look," Marcus whispered. "Whatever you do, don't open the curtains." But I wanted to look. God help me. Some part of me desperately wanted to know what was out there. My hand moved toward the curtain before I even realized I was doing it. Marcus grabbed my wrist. "Sophia, no." The scratching stopped. The breathing stopped. The wind stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard footsteps on the RV's roof. Whatever was up there was heavy. Each step made the entire vehicle creak and groan. It walked from the front to the back, slowly, deliberately. Then it stopped directly above where we were huddled. Tap, tap, tap. 3 measured knocks on the roof, right over our heads. "Sophia." The voice came from above, from inside, from everywhere. My own voice, perfectly replicated. "Sophia, let me in. I'm cold. I'm scared. Please let me in." My hands were shaking so hard I thought I might fly apart. Because that was my voice. My exact voice, the one I heard on recordings. The one that always sounded slightly wrong to my own ears, but that everyone else said was exactly right. "Sophia, please. It's cold out here. It's dark. Let me in." Marcus wrapped his arms around me, buried his face in my hair. I could feel him shaking, too. Could feel his tears on my neck. "It's not me," I whispered. "That's not me. I know. Sophia, please. I don't want to be alone. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." The voice rose to a scream, my scream, a sound of such anguish and terror that my heart broke hearing it even though I knew it wasn't real. Whatever was up there was using my voice like a tool, like a key trying to unlock something inside us. The scratching started again, frantic now, all over the RV. The roof, the walls, the door. The vehicle shook with the force of it. Things fell from cabinets, a window cracked, and through it all, my voice screaming, begging, demanding to be let in. I don't know how long it lasted. Hours, maybe. Or maybe time didn't work right here anymore. Maybe minutes stretched into eternities. But eventually, finally, it stopped. The scratching ceased. The voice faded. The wind died. And in the silence that followed, I heard something else. Something worse. Humming. A child's humming. A lullaby I recognized from my own childhood. It came from inside the RV, from the small bedroom at the back. Marcus and I stared at each other in the dim light of our single battery-powered lantern. The bedroom door was closed. We hadn't closed it, but now it was closed, and on the other side, something was humming. "We need to check," Marcus whispered. "No." "Sophia, if something got in, then we run. We don't open that door." But even as I said it, the door swung open, slowly, silently, revealing the dark bedroom beyond. The humming continued, sweet and innocent. I grabbed the flashlight with shaking hands and pointed it at the doorway. The bedroom was empty. The bed was still made, our bags still in the corner. Nothing there. But the humming continued, and now I could see where it was coming from. The mirror above the small dresser. In the reflection, standing behind where Marcus and I sat on the couch, was a little girl. She was maybe 7 or 8, wearing a dirty white dress, her hair long and tangled. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were wrong, too dark, taking up too much space. And she was humming, staring at us in the mirror, her mouth moving with the melody. I spun around. Nothing there, just the empty RV. But when I looked back at the mirror, she was still there. Still humming, now reaching out a hand toward my reflection. "Sophia," she said, her child's voice sweet and rotting at the same time. "Sophia, I found you. I've been looking everywhere. Why did you hide from me?" "I don't know you," I managed to say. The child tilted her head, the same wrong mechanical movement the deer had made. "Yes, you do. You called me. Every night you called my name. Sophia, Sophia, Sophia. And now I'm here." In the mirror, her hand touched my reflection's shoulder. I felt it on my real shoulder. A weight, a pressure, fingers that felt like ice and rot. "Get off me!" I screamed, lurching forward off the couch. The hand lifted. The child in the mirror smiled, showing too many teeth, teeth that were too sharp. Then she faded, her humming fading with her, until there was nothing in the mirror but our own terrified faces staring back. We didn't sleep that night. We couldn't. We sat back to back in the middle of the RV, the flashlight between us, watching every shadow, every reflection. And as the night dragged on, more things happened. The cabinets opened and closed by themselves. The faucet dripped water that looked black in the flashlight beam. The clock on the microwave ran backward. And everywhere, everywhere, I heard whispers of my name. Dawn came eventually. It always does. But the light didn't feel like salvation anymore. It just meant we'd survived another night. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling constantly. When he spoke, his voice cracked. "We can't stay here. We can't leave. The road loops back. You know it does. Then we go cross-country. We pick a direction and we walk until we find something, someone. We can't stay here, Sophia. Another night like that and I can't." I understood. I felt it too, the sense that our minds were cracking, that reality itself was becoming negotiable. How many impossible things could you witness before your brain just gave up trying to make sense of the world? "Okay," I said. "We go. Now." We take water and we walk. We gathered what we could carry, 2 bottles of water each, some trail mix, the knife, the flashlight. We didn't pack carefully, didn't plan. We just grabbed things and stuffed them in a backpack and opened the RV door. The morning air hit us like a wall. It was thick, humid, wrong for October in Texas. It smelled like ozone and copper and something else, something organic I couldn't identify. The trees around our site had moved closer again. They were maybe 5 feet from the RV now, their branches reaching toward us. "Don't look at them," Marcus said. "Just walk, pick a direction, and walk." We chose east, toward where the sun was rising. We climbed over some low brush, pushed through juniper branches that grabbed at our clothes, and entered the wilderness. For the first hour, we made good progress. The terrain was rough but manageable, and the act of moving, of doing something, helped quiet the panic. We kept the sun to our right, using it as a compass point, determined not to circle back. But the forest fought us. Brush that had seemed thin from a distance became impenetrable up close. Rocky outcroppings that looked small proved to be cliffs we had to climb around. And the trees kept appearing ahead of us no matter which direction we turned. After 3 hours, we stopped to rest and drink water. Marcus checked his phone, though we both knew there'd be no signal. "Battery's at 12%, he said. "It was fully charged this morning. Mine was the same, draining impossibly fast, as if something was feeding on them." "We keep going," I said. We walked for another 2 hours, then 3. The sun climbed overhead, then started to sink, and we saw nothing but trees. No roads, no trails, no signs of human presence, just endless wilderness, pressing in from all sides. As dusk approached, we had to face the truth. We were going to have to spend the night out here, in the open, with whatever had been scratching at our RV. "We need shelter," Marcus said. His voice was dull, exhausted. "Find something. Anything." We found a small depression in the ground, ringed by rocks, that offered some protection from the wind. We didn't have sleeping bags, didn't have a tent, just the clothes on our backs and the backpack with our dwindling supplies. As darkness fell, we huddled together in our makeshift shelter, and the wind started again. "Sophia, Sophia, Sophia." But this time, it wasn't just my name. This time I heard other things in the wind, voices I recognized. My mother, dead 5 years. My childhood best friend, lost touch a decade ago. My college roommate who I'd stopped speaking to after a fight I couldn't even remember. All of them calling my name. All of them begging me to answer. "Don't listen," Marcus whispered, but I could hear it in his voice. He was hearing things too, his own ghosts, his own voices. The night became a fever dream. Things moved in the darkness around us, too fast to be animals, too silent to be human. The stars overhead spun in patterns that made my eyes hurt. At one point, I was convinced I saw my own body standing 20 feet away, watching us with my own eyes. Marcus kept talking, a constant stream of words, maybe to keep himself sane, or maybe to keep me sane. He talked about our wedding, about vacations we'd taken, about the apartment we'd lived in before we bought our house. Normal things, safe things. But his words sounded hollow, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe in anymore. Around what must have been 3 in the morning, the child appeared again. She didn't materialize or fade in. She was just suddenly there, standing at the edge of our shelter, her white dress glowing faintly in the darkness. Up close, she was worse than in the mirror. Her skin had a grayish tinge, and I could see veins underneath it. Black veins that pulsed with something that wasn't blood. Her eyes reflected our flashlight beam like an animal's. "Sophia," she said, "you promised you'd play with me." "I never promised you anything," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. "Yes, you did. Every time you came here, you promised. Every time you walked these trails, every time you breathed this air. You made yourself part of this place, and this place made me for you." "Made you?" The child smiled. "I'm what the wilderness dreams. I'm what it imagines when it thinks about little girls. And you called me here, with your name, with your voice, with your fear. I'm yours, Sophia, forever and ever." She took a step closer. Marcus moved in front of me, but the child just laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You can't protect her from me. I'm already inside her. Every time she hears her name in the wind, I get stronger. Every time she sees her reflection, I get more real. Soon, I'll be real enough to touch her." And then, the child's face changed, rippling like water, and suddenly it was my face looking back at me. My face as a child, my features, my expression. She even had the small scar on her chin where I'd fallen off my bike when I was 6. "And then, I'll be her," the child said in my adult voice, "and she'll be nothing at all." She faded then, dissolving into the darkness like she'd never been there. But I could still hear her humming, that same lullaby, coming from everywhere and nowhere. We survived that night, and the next day, and the next night. I don't remember much of it. The days and nights started to blur together, a constant cycle of walking and hiding and listening to my name in the wind. We ran out of water on the 2nd day. On the 3rd day, Marcus tried to eat some berries and vomited for an hour. The forest itself seemed to be changing around us, or maybe we were the ones changing, losing our grip on what was real. Trees had faces if you looked at them long enough. Rocks moved when you weren't watching. The sun rose in different positions each morning, and everywhere, always, my name in the air, getting stronger, getting more insistent. Sophia, 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 like a heartbeat, like a countdown. On the 4th day, or maybe the 5th, I'd lost track, we found something that didn't belong. It was a mirror, full-length, ornate frame, just standing in a clearing in the middle of nowhere. It reflected the forest perfectly, except for one thing. In the reflection, there were people. Dozens of them standing among the trees, all watching us, all with their mouths open, all chanting. "Sophia, Sophia, Sophia." Marcus grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it, we need to go." But I couldn't stop looking, because among those figures in the mirror I saw her, the little girl, and she was smiling, and she was beckoning. "She wants me to go in," I said. I don't know why I said it. I don't know how I knew, but I did know. The mirror was a door. The child was waiting on the other side. "Sophia, no." I pulled away from Marcus and walked toward the mirror. Each step felt like wading through thick water, like reality itself was resisting. But I kept going, because I understood now. This was what the wilderness wanted, what it had been building toward since the moment we arrived. It wanted me. It had always wanted me. I reached out and touched the mirror's surface. It was warm, soft, like skin. The reflection rippled, and the child's hand emerged from the glass, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was freezing, burning, agonizing. She pulled, and I felt myself being drawn into the mirror, into that reflected world where the chanting figures waited. Marcus screamed and grabbed me, trying to pull me back. For a moment we were suspended there, stretched between two realities, me half in the mirror and half out, the child pulling one way and Marcus pulling the other. Then something gave. I fell backward out of the mirror, Marcus falling with me. We hit the ground hard, and when I looked up, the mirror was gone. Just gone, as if it had never been there. But the child's grip had left a mark. Around my wrist, burned into the skin, was a ring of symbols. Not letters, not any alphabet I recognized. Just shapes that hurt to look at, that seemed to move when I wasn't focusing on them. "What did she do to you?" Marcus whispered. I don't know. But I did know. The child had marked me, claimed me. I was hers now, in some way I didn't fully understand. And looking at Marcus's face, seeing the horror and desperation there, I knew something else too. We weren't getting out of here. Not both of us. Maybe not either of us. That realization should have broken me. Maybe it did. But it also brought a strange kind of clarity. If we were trapped here, if this was where we were going to die, then I needed to understand why. I needed to know what this place was, what it wanted, what the child was. That night, as we huddled in another makeshift shelter, I made a decision. I'm going to talk to her, I said. The child. I'm going to call her. Sophia? No, she's coming anyway, Marcus. Every night she gets closer. Maybe if I talk to her, if I understand what she wants, we can find a way out of this. You saw what she tried to do. She tried to take you into that mirror. I know, but I have to try something. We can't just keep running. We're going to die out here if we do. Marcus was silent for a long time. Then, okay, but I'm right here. If anything happens, I know. I stood up and walked a few feet away from our shelter. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead, and the wind was already starting to chant my name. I closed my eyes and added my own voice to it. Sophia, I said. Sophia, Sophia, I'm here. I'm calling you. Come talk to me. The wind picked up immediately. The chanting grew louder. And then, silence. She appeared in front of me without warning, without sound. The child, with my face, with those two dark eyes. You called, she said. Finally. What are you? I told you. I'm what the wilderness dreams. That's not an answer. She tilted her head, my childhood head. This place is old, older than people, older than names, and it's hungry. It feeds on fear, on confusion, on the dissolution of the self. You came here and brought your name with you, brought your identity, and the wilderness tasted it, and it wanted more. So you're... what? A ghost, a demon. I'm a reflection. You spoke your name so many times in your life, Sophia, millions of times. Every time you introduced yourself, every time you signed a document, every time you heard someone call for you, all those repetitions, all that power you gave to those syllables, the wilderness collected them, shaped them, made me. I understood then, in a horrible moment of clarity. Names had power here. Identity had power. And by bringing mine into this place, by existing here as Sophia for days, I'd given the wilderness enough material to create this thing, this reflection of me. What do you want? To be real, fully real. Right now, I'm just potential, a shadow of a shadow. But if I take your place, if I become you completely... She smiled. Then I get to live, in the real world, as you. And what happens to me? You stay here. You become part of the wilderness. You feed it, give it strength, and maybe, someday, it'll use you to make someone else's reflection, someone else's dream. I won't let you." The child laughed. "You don't have a choice. It's already happening. Every time you hear your name, I grow stronger. Every time you doubt yourself, I become more real. Give it a few more days and you won't be able to tell which one of us is the original." She was right. I could feel it. Since I'd touched that mirror, since she'd marked me, I'd been feeling less solid, less real. My memories were becoming hazy, my sense of self fragmenting. Sometimes I'd forget my age, my address, the name of my best friend from high school. Little pieces of my identity crumbling away. There has to be a way to stop you. There is, but you won't do it. Tell me. The child stepped closer. Give up your name. Stop being Sophia. Become nameless, selfless. If you have no identity, I have nothing to copy, nothing to become. But that means losing everything that makes you you. All your memories, all your relationships, all your experiences. You'd be a blank slate, empty. Is that really better than letting me win? I stared at her, at my own face, my own eyes, and I thought about what she was asking. To give up my name, to stop being Sophia, to stop being me. "I need to think," I said. The child smiled. "Take your time, but not too much. You're fading fast, Sophia. Soon there won't be enough of you left to make the choice." She disappeared, and I was alone with the wind and the stars and the chanting of my own name. I told Marcus everything the child had said. He listened in silence, his face unreadable in the darkness. "So we either let this thing steal your identity," he finally said, "or you give up your identity yourself. Those seem to be the options. What about me? If you become blank, nameless, will you even remember me?" The question broke my heart. "I don't know." "Then we find a third option. We fight this thing. How, Marcus? How do we fight something made of air and thought and fear? We don't have weapons that work on that. We don't have any weapons at all. Then we find help. We keep walking until we find someone. There is no someone." The words burst out of me, raw and desperate. We've been walking for days and we've found nothing. No roads, no people, no way out. This forest is infinite, or we're trapped in some kind of loop, or we're already dead and this is hell. I don't know anymore, but I know we're not finding help. Marcus grabbed my shoulders. "Then we make it back to the RV. At least there we had walls, had shelter. We figure this out together. A sound cut him off. A sound that didn't belong. An engine. We both froze, listening. There it was again, the distant rumble of a motor getting closer. Through the trees, I saw lights. Headlights, bouncing over rough terrain. "Someone's here," Marcus breathed. "Someone found us." We ran toward the sound, crashing through brush, not caring about the noise. The lights grew brighter, the engine louder. A vehicle, a truck, it looked like, pushing through the forest toward us. "Help!" Marcus shouted. "We're here! We need help!" The truck stopped maybe 50 yards away. The engine idled. The headlights illuminated the trees, creating stark shadows. A door opened and someone got out. It was Dale, the ranger. He stood beside his truck, backlit by the headlights, and even from a distance I could tell something was wrong with the way he stood. Too stiff, too still. "Folks," he called out, "I've been looking for you." We ran toward him, relief flooding through me. Rescue. Finally rescue. But as we got closer, I saw his face in the headlights. Saw his eyes. They were too dark, too large, reflecting the light like an animal's. Marcus saw it too and stopped running. "No," he said. "No, that's not—" "I told you," Dale said, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was multiple voices, speaking in unison. "I told you to stay inside if things got strange, but you didn't listen. You walked out into the wilderness, and the wilderness walked into you." His mouth opened too wide, and that same chanting came out. "Sophia, Sophia, Sophia." The truck's headlights flickered, and in the moments of darkness between, I saw what was really there. Not a truck, Not Dale. Just shapes in the dark, writhing shapes that hurt to look at, and somewhere in the middle of them, the child with my face, smiling. "Last chance," the child said in Dale's voice. "Give me your name or I'll take it. Choose, Sophia. Choose now." Marcus grabbed my hand. "Run," he whispered. We ran, back into the forest, away from the thing that wasn't Dale, away from the child, away from everything. Branches tore at our clothes and skin. Roots grabbed at our feet. And behind us, I heard the child laughing, heard multiple voices chanting my name, heard the wilderness itself roaring with something that might have been hunger or triumph or joy. We ran until we couldn't anymore, until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. We collapsed in a heap, gasping, bleeding, broken. And in the silence that followed, I made my decision. "Marcus," I said, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to give up my name." "No, I have to. It's the only way to stop her. You'll lose everything. You won't remember us. Our life. Our love." I know. Tears were streaming down my face. But at least I'll be alive. Something of me will survive. And maybe someday I'll find my way back. I didn't believe that. But I needed to say it. For him. For me. "How do you even do it?" Marcus asked. His voice was broken. "How do you give up your name?" I thought about the child's words. Give up your identity. Become nameless, selfless. But how did one actually do that? How did you stop being yourself? And then I understood. It wasn't about magic words or rituals. It was about belief. About truly, genuinely letting go of the construct we call identity. About releasing every association, every memory, every definition that tied me to the name Sophia. I closed my eyes, and I began. I let go of my childhood, of the little girl who'd skinned her chin falling off a bike. Let go of teenage crushes and college finals and my first job. Let go of meeting Marcus, of our wedding, of late-night conversations and Sunday mornings. Let go of my parents, my friends, my favorite foods and colors and songs. Let go of every like and dislike, every hope and fear, every tiny piece of personality and history that made me who I was. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than anything I'd ever experienced, like tearing out my own soul piece by piece. But I kept going. I had to. I let go of the name itself. Sophia. Such a simple sound. 3 syllables that had defined me for 34 years. I released them into the wind, watched them float away like ashes. And as I let go, I felt something else rush in to fill the void. Something vast and old and hungry. The wilderness, claiming what I'd released. Taking the identity I'd given up and absorbing it, feeding on it. But I also felt the child's presence weaken. Felt her grip on reality loosening. Without my identity to anchor herself to, she was becoming unstable, dissolving back into the potential she'd been formed from. "No," I heard her scream, my scream, but fading. "You can't. I was so close. I was almost real." But she was wrong. I could. I did. I opened my eyes. Marcus was staring at me, tears streaming down his face. "Sophia," he said. The name meant nothing to me. It was just a sound. I looked at this man. I knew he was important somehow, knew he mattered, but I couldn't remember why. Couldn't remember his name or my name or anything at all. Who? My voice sounded strange, empty. Who am I? Marcus's face crumpled. No, please. But it was done. I'd given up my name, my identity, myself, and in doing so I'd saved what little remained of me. The forest around us began to change. The oppressive presence lifted. The trees stopped leaning inward. The air tasted normal again. And in the distance I heard birds singing normal morning songs. "The RV," Marcus said, pointing. "It's right there." I looked and saw it. A large vehicle parked in a clearing. It meant nothing to me, but Marcus took my hand and led me toward it. His hand was warm, safe. I held on tight. The engine started on the first try. Marcus drove us out of the forest, out of Devil's Backbone wilderness, back onto paved roads that stretched toward civilization. I watched the trees pass by, watched the wilderness recede, and felt nothing. Not relief, not fear, not anything at all. I was alive. But I wasn't Sophia anymore. I wasn't anyone. That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this in the apartment Marcus brought me to after we escaped. He says it's our home, that we lived here together for years. I don't remember it. But the walls are familiar somehow, in a way I can't explain. Marcus has been patient. So patient. He tells me stories about who I used to be, about Sophia, about how we met, what she liked, what she dreamed about. Sometimes I feel something when he talks, a flicker, an echo like a memory trying to surface, but it never quite does. The doctors say I have dissociative amnesia, trauma-induced. They think I'll recover eventually. They're wrong, of course. What happened to me wasn't medical. It was metaphysical, spiritual. I didn't forget who I was. I deleted myself. But recently, I've started to notice things. Small things. The way I prefer my coffee. The songs I hum without thinking. The way I arrange the books on the shelf. Patterns emerging, habits forming. A new identity, coalescing out of the void I created. I'm not Sophia anymore. I'll never be Sophia again. But I'm becoming someone. Someone new. Someone without all that history and baggage and fear. Sometimes Marcus calls me by name, my old name, and catches himself, apologizes. I don't mind. Let him remember her. Let him hold on to that ghost. I'm just trying to learn how to be human again. The only thing that bothers me, the only thing that still reaches through the emptiness and creates something like fear, is the wind. When the wind blows outside our apartment, when it rattles the windows and whistles through the eaves, I hear something in it. Not words, not anymore, but a rhythm, a pattern. 3 syllables, repeating. The wind hasn't forgotten my name, even if I have. And sometimes late at night when Marcus is asleep and I'm alone with my thoughts, or the empty space where thoughts should be, I wonder if I made the right choice. I wonder if being nobody is really better than being consumed. I wonder if the thing I saved is enough of me to matter. I don't have answers. I don't think I ever will. But I'm alive. I'm here. I'm breathing and eating and existing. And every day I become a little more real, a little more solid, a little more myself, even if that self has no name. Even if that self is built on absence rather than presence. Even if that self will always hear the wind chanting something I can no longer remember but can never quite forget. Marcus says we'll never go camping again. I don't know why we would have gone in the first place, but I believe him when he says it, and I'm grateful. Because even without memories, even without identity, some part of me, some deep, primal part, knows the truth. The wilderness is still hungry. The child is still out there, diminished but not destroyed. And if I ever set foot in those woods again, if I ever breathe that air and let it breathe me, I'll be giving her another chance to become real, another chance to steal whatever fragile new self I've built. So I stay in the city, stay surrounded by concrete and glass and the noise of thousands of other lives. I avoid nature, avoid forests, avoid anywhere the wind blows too strong or too strange. And I try not to listen when it whispers something that sounds almost, but not quite, like a name I used to know. Story. 4. My name is Isaac. I'm 34. The rocks at Kisatchie National Forest clicked like teeth. I should have known better than to bring the RV down that narrow service road, but Vanessa had been insistent. She'd found the coordinates on some obscure camping forum, a dispersed site deep in the Louisiana wilderness where cell service died and civilization became a memory. We need this, she'd said, gripping my hand across our kitchen table. Just us. No distractions. Her eyes had that desperate quality they'd carried since the miscarriage, and I would have driven us into hell itself if she'd asked. The Kisatchie stretches across central Louisiana like a scar, Over 600,000 acres of longleaf pine and hardwood bottomlands. Most tourists stick to the developed campgrounds near Alexandria, but Vanessa wanted isolation. She wanted to be somewhere we could scream if we needed to, somewhere we could fall apart without witnesses. I understood. God knows I understood. Our RV was a 32-foot Winnebago we'd bought the previous spring, back when we still talked about the future like it was something we could count on. The thing handled like a whale on wheels, and as I navigated the increasingly primitive road deeper into the forest, I heard every loose item in the cabinets rattling in protest. Pine branches scraped along the aluminum sides with sounds like fingernails. "How much further?" I asked, squinting at the GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. The screen flickered, the blue location dot stuttering across a blank green space. "Should be just another mile," Vanessa said, studying her phone even though the signal had died 20 minutes back. She'd screenshot the directions, thank God. There's supposed to be a clearing near Bayou Cypre. The guy who posted about it said you could hear the water at night. The guy who posted about it. I wondered now who that had been, what had drawn them to this particular patch of wilderness, whether they'd heard the rocks. I heard them first around sunset, as I was leveling the RV on a relatively flat section of the clearing we'd found. The space was perfect in an eerie sort of way, a rough circle of bare earth surrounded by towering pines, their trunks so thick it would take 3 people linking hands to encircle one. The ground was carpeted with rust-colored needles, and the air smelled of resin and something else, something older and damper that reminded me of root cellars. The clicking started as a sporadic sound, like random pebbles knocking together in the wind. I was on my knees, adjusting the stabilizer jacks when I noticed it. Click, pause, click, click. It seemed to come from the tree line, from the spaces between the massive trunks where the shadows pooled like oil. "You hear that?" I called to Vanessa, who was inside organizing our supplies. She appeared in the doorway, one hand shading her eyes against the low sun breaking through the canopy. "Hear what?" "That clicking sound, like rocks hitting each other." We both stood silent, listening. The forest provided its usual evening chorus, crickets warming up, a distant crow, wind moving through pine needles, but no clicking. I felt foolish. "Probably just thermal expansion," I said. "Rocks cooling down after the sun's been on them all day." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Nothing had reached her eyes in months. "Sure, that makes sense." She went back inside, and I returned to my work, trying to ignore the way my hands had started to shake. The clicking came back after dark. We were sitting outside in our fold-out chairs, a small fire crackling in the portable pit between us. Vanessa had barely touched her dinner, foil-wrapped chicken and vegetables I'd prepared at home, and I'd given up trying to make conversation. The silence between us had become its own presence, a third person at every meal, in every room. I'd thought maybe out here, stripped of our normal routines and reminders, we might find a way back to each other. The sound started low, almost subsonic. Click, 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 click. It seemed to circle us, moving through the darkness beyond our fire's reach. I saw Vanessa's head turn, tracking the noise. "There," I said, vindicated. "You hear it now?" She nodded, slowly. "What is it?" "I don't know. Maybe there's a creek nearby we didn't notice, water moving stones around." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't right. This sound had a rhythm to it, an intentionality. It would stop for long moments, then resume from a different direction. Click, click, click. Pause. Click. 3 rapid clicks from the north, then a single answering click from the east, like something communicating. "I don't like it," Vanessa whispered. She'd drawn her knees up to her chest, making herself small in the camp chair. The firelight played across her face, highlighting the new gauntness there, the way grief had carved away everything soft. "It's just the forest," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Lots of sounds out here we're not used to. Remember that camping trip we took in the Smokies? We kept hearing this weird hooting and thought it was some kind of owl, but it turned out to be Isaac." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "This is different. You know it is." The clicking stopped abruptly, as if whatever made it had heard her speak its truth. The silence that followed felt worse somehow, expectant and hungry. Even the crickets had gone quiet. "Let's go inside," I said, standing. "It's getting cold anyway." We retreated to the RV, locking the door behind us, a gesture that felt simultaneously absurd and necessary. Through the windows I could see our fire dying down, the flames guttering in some breeze I couldn't feel. Beyond the failing light, the forest was a wall of absolute darkness. No moon tonight, I realized. No stars visible through the dense canopy. Vanessa went straight to the bedroom at the back of the RV and closed the door. I heard the lock turn, another barrier between us. I stood in the narrow galley kitchen, listening to the cooling ticks of the engine, the settlement sounds of the RV, the click, click, click. It was right outside, so close it might have been pressed against the aluminum wall. I froze, my hand halfway to the light switch, suddenly terrified of what I might see if I looked through the windows. The clicking continued, circling the RV now, a slow orbit that made the hair on my neck stand up. "Isaac." Vanessa's voice was small, muffled by the bedroom door. "It's okay," I lied. "Just give me a minute." I forced myself to move to the nearest window, the one over the dinette. My reflection stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed, until I cupped my hands around my face and pressed close to the glass. The fire had gone out completely. I could see nothing beyond my own ghost face, just darkness and the faint gleaming of what might have been eyes, or might have been water on the glass, or might have been nothing at all. The clicking stopped. I don't know how long I stood there, heart hammering, waiting for it to resume. Eventually, exhaustion won over adrenaline. I checked all the windows one more time, made sure both doors were locked, and lay down on the converted dinette bed without even bothering to pull out the sheets. Sleep ambushed me despite everything. I woke to silence. Not peaceful silence. Absolute silence. No crickets, no wind, no distant animal sounds. Just a void of sound so complete it felt like being underwater. I fumbled for my phone. 3:47 a.m. The witching hour, my grandmother would have called it, when the barrier between worlds grew thin. Something was different about the RV. It took me a moment to realize what. The slight tilt was gone. When I'd leveled us yesterday evening, I'd gotten it close but not perfect. There was still a subtle lean toward the passenger side. Now we were perfectly level. I could feel it in my inner ear, see it in the way the shadows fell from the nightlight in the galley. My breath clouded in front of my face. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees. I could see frost forming on the inside of the windows, delicate ferns of ice spreading across the glass in patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like letters. I stood on numb feet and moved to the window. Outside, dawn was still hours away, but the darkness had changed quality. It had texture now, like I was looking at a wall painted matte black instead of natural night. And in that darkness, things moved, pale shapes, roughly human height, drifting between the pine trunks. They seemed to flicker in and out of existence, there one moment and gone the next, like footage with missing frames. I counted 5, 7, a dozen, more emerging from the forest, forming a ring around our RV. Click, 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 click. The sound was coming from them, from the stones they carried, gray rocks the size of fists that they struck together in that rhythmic pattern. The noise wasn't random after all. It was language. One of the shapes drifted closer to the RV. Through the frost-rimed window I could make out more details. Impossibly thin limbs, a head that seemed too large for its body, eyes that reflected what little light existed like a cat's. When it opened its mouth, I saw teeth, too many teeth, grinding together with that same clicking sound. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the galley counter hard enough to bruise. The impact made a thudding sound that seemed catastrophically loud in the suffocating silence. Every pale shape outside stopped moving. Every head turned toward the RV with synchronized precision. Then they started clicking faster. The rhythm accelerated, became urgent. More shapes emerged from the forest, and I realized with dawning horror that we were completely surrounded. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all striking their stones together in a crescendo that sounded like applause, like laughter, like teeth. Isaac! Vanessa's scream cut through everything. Isaac, there's something in here. I ran to the bedroom, threw my shoulder against the locked door. Open up, Vanessa, let me in. I can't. There's something. I heard her struggling with the lock, heard the wet sound of her panic breathing. Then the door flew open and she crashed into me, nearly knocking us both down. Her face was sheet white, her pupils blown so wide her eyes looked black. In the mirror, she gasped, pointing back into the bedroom. I saw it in the mirror. The bedroom was empty. The small mirror mounted above the dresser showed only the reflection of the bed, the curtained window, the open door where we stood. But the glass had changed. Frost covered it in spiderweb patterns, and beneath the frost, shadows moved independently of any light source. As I watched, a face pressed against the mirror from the inside. Not our reflection, something else, something with too many teeth, with eyes that clicked and ground like stones. I slammed the bedroom door shut and dragged Vanessa toward the front of the RV. We're leaving, now. We can't. We're leaving. I practically threw her into the passenger seat and scrambled behind the wheel, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over with agonizing slowness, and for one terrible moment I thought it wouldn't start at all. Then it caught, roaring to life, and I threw the transmission into drive. The RV lurched forward maybe 10 feet before grinding to a halt with a shriek of metal. I gunned the engine and it screamed in protest but didn't move. Through the windshield I could see them. The pale shapes, dozens pressed against the front of the RV, their thin arms braced against the vehicle. They were holding us in place. "Back up!" Vanessa shrieked. "Go backward!" I shifted into reverse. Same result. The RV shuddered but moved nowhere. They were behind us too, all around us, a cage of clicking stones and grinding teeth. One of them placed its palm against the windshield directly in front of my face. Its hand was gray as river stone, the fingers too long and bending in too many places. When it pulled away, it left a handprint of frost that didn't melt. What do they want? Vanessa's voice had gone hollow with terror. What do they want from us? I had no answer. I could only watch as more of them pressed against the windows, their faces blank and alien, their mouths opening and closing in that rhythmic clicking that I now understood wasn't just random sound but something far worse. Words in a language older than ours, instructions or invitations or demands in a tongue that had never been human. The frost was spreading. It crawled across the windshield in fractal patterns, covering every window, coating the metal walls of the RV. The temperature inside plummeted. I could see Vanessa's breath, see the ice forming on her eyelashes. "The bedroom," I said suddenly. "We lock ourselves in the bedroom. There's less window space, we can—" "There's something in the bedroom," she screamed. "I told you. I saw it. Then we stay here. We wait for sunrise. When the sun comes up, they'll leave. Things like this, they can't survive daylight. That's how it works in all the stories." But I didn't believe my own words, and I could see in Vanessa's eyes that she didn't either. These things weren't from stories. They were older than stories, older than the words to tell them. The clicking changed rhythm. It became slower, more deliberate. Click, pause, click, click, pause, click, 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 like a countdown. "Isaac, I have to tell you something." Vanessa grabbed my arm, her nails digging in through my jacket. I need you to know it wasn't your fault. The baby. What happened? It wasn't because you were working too much or because we fought or any of the reasons I let you believe. She choked on the words. I wanted to lose it. I didn't take the prenatal vitamins. I kept lifting heavy things. I wished it gone and it went. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying, unable to reconcile this confession with the terror of our immediate situation. Around us, the clicking accelerated again, and I realized with a jolt of understanding that they were responding to her words, feeding on them somehow, on the guilt and pain and poisonous truth. "Don't," I said. "Don't say anything else. That's what they want. They want." But she kept talking, words spilling out in a desperate flood. I was so scared of being a mother, of failing, of becoming like my mother. And then, when it happened, When I started bleeding, I was relieved. I was relieved, and then I hated myself, and I've been drowning in it ever since, and I can't. Stop! I clamped my hand over her mouth, but it was too late. The clicking had become deafening, a thunderous applause. The things outside pressed closer, their mouths open wide, drinking in her confession like wine. The frost inside the RV reached critical mass. Ice coated every surface now. My fingers stuck to the steering wheel. Vanessa's tears froze on her cheeks, and through the shell of ice on the windshield I saw them beginning to change. They were taking shape, becoming more solid, more defined, no longer flickering ghost things but corporeal beings with weight and substance. And as they solidified, I recognized something in their faces, saw hints of human features beneath the alien structure. One had Vanessa's high cheekbones. Another had my father's distinctive nose. A third, a small one, barely 4 feet tall, had the beginning of what might have been my son's face, if my son had been born, if he had grown beyond the 12-week cluster of cells that Vanessa had bled out on our bathroom floor. "Oh, God," Vanessa whispered. "Oh, God, what are they?" I understood then, with the terrible clarity that comes with true horror. They weren't aliens or monsters or demons. They were the never-born, the potential that never was, the ghosts of every child never conceived or carried to term in these woods across centuries of human presence. Native American burial grounds, pioneer graves, forgotten tragedies, all of it concentrated here, in this place where the barrier between what is and what might have been had grown thin. And we had brought them an offering. We had brought them our guilt, our grief, our never-born son, and they were claiming him. The smallest one, the one with the hint of my son's face, pressed against Vanessa's window. Its hand, no bigger than an infant's but made of stone and frost, reached through the glass as if it were water, reached for Vanessa, reached for its mother. "No!" I threw myself across her, covering her body with mine. "You can't have her. You can't." The hand touched my face. It felt like being plunged into Arctic water, like dying, like being unmade at the molecular level. I felt myself starting to come apart, felt my warmth draining away, felt my substance thinning into something less than real. And then Vanessa was screaming, really screaming, a sound I'd never heard her make before. She shoved me aside with strength I didn't know she possessed and grabbed the thing's hand. "I'm sorry," she screamed at it, at them, at all of them. "I'm sorry I didn't want you. I'm sorry I wished you gone. I'm sorry, I'm—" Light exploded through the RV. Not natural light, something else, something that burned like phosphorus, that seemed to come from Vanessa herself. She was glowing, incandescent with grief and guilt, and a mother's love that had arrived too late but arrived nonetheless. The thing that might have been our son pulled back from the light, and I saw something flicker across its stone face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, or pain. The clicking stopped. All of them stopped, frozen in postures of reaching, of hunger, of need. And then, like snow melting in fast forward, they began to dissolve. First, the small one, the one that had reached for us, its face blurring back into abstraction before disappearing entirely. Then the others, one by one, fading into the darkness as the unnatural light pouring from Vanessa drove them back. When the last of them vanished, the light went out. Vanessa collapsed in the passenger seat, gasping for breath, her face slack with exhaustion. The frost on the windows began to melt. The temperature slowly climbed back toward normal. Outside, through the clearing windshield, I could see the faint gray light of approaching dawn. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to our own breathing, to the gradual return of natural forest sounds. A bird calling, the rustle of wind in pine needles. I wanted to ask her how she'd done that, what that light had been, but I was afraid of the answer. Afraid that if we spoke about it, we'd have to speak about everything else. "We should go," I finally said. My voice came out hoarse, barely recognizable. Vanessa nodded without looking at me. I restarted the engine. It turned over easily now, like nothing had happened, and began the slow process of backing out of the clearing. The RV responded normally, no invisible hands holding us in place. As we bumped over the rough ground toward the service road, I glanced in the side mirror one last time. The clearing looked ordinary in the growing light. Just a circle of bare earth surrounded by pines. But the ground was different than I remembered. It was covered with stones now, gray rocks the size of fists, arranged in concentric circles like a spiral leading inward. Or like the rings you'd see on a tree stump, marking years of growth. Or like a target. We drove in silence for the first hour, navigating the primitive roads back toward civilization. When we finally hit paved highway, when I could see other cars and the blessed normalcy of human infrastructure, Vanessa spoke for the first time. "Do you think—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Do you think that was real?" I wanted to say no. Wanted to dismiss it as shared hallucination, carbon monoxide poisoning, anything that would let us pretend we hadn't seen what we'd seen. But I couldn't lie to her. Not after what she'd confessed. Not after what we'd survived together. "Yes," I said. "I think it was real." She nodded, staring out the window at the passing landscape, the light that came out of me. I felt him in it. Our son, like he was there with me for just a second, like he was helping me push them away. Is that crazy? "No," I said, and I meant it. We stopped at a gas station outside of Alexandria to refuel and use the bathroom. When I came out of the convenience store with coffee and gas station pastries, I found Vanessa standing by the RV's passenger side, staring at something. "Isaac," she said quietly. "Look." I followed her gaze. The aluminum siding of the RV, which had been pristine silver when we left home, was now covered in dents. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each about the size of a fist. They covered the entire passenger side from front to back, some shallow, some deep enough to buckle the metal. The pattern was too regular to be accidental, too intentional to be natural damage. It looked like something had been pounding on the walls all night, like something had been trying to get in, or like something had been trying to get out. Vanessa traced one of the dents with her finger. "We can't tell anyone about this," she said. "They'll think we're insane." "I know. And we can't go back there. Ever. I know." She turned to face me, and for the first time since the miscarriage I saw something in her eyes besides grief. Fear, yes, but also a strange kind of resolve. But we can't pretend it didn't happen either. We saw what we saw. We have to. We have to live with that now. With what those things were. With what I told you. I pulled her close, feeling her shake against me. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Together." But even as I said it, I knew some things couldn't be figured out, only survived. And some things, once seen, could never be unseen. We drove home that day, stopping only for gas and food. The dents in the RV's siding remained, a permanent reminder of that night. We told people we'd run into some hail, that we'd been stupid enough to camp during storm season. Most believed us. A few gave us odd looks, like they could sense we were lying, like they could smell the terror still clinging to our clothes. Vanessa and I started therapy, both together and separately. It helped some. She told the therapist about her guilt over the miscarriage. Not all of it, not the part about wishing the baby gone, but enough. I told mine about my own guilt, about how I'd failed to see how much she was struggling, how I'd been so focused on my own grief I'd ignored hers. But we never told anyone about Kisachi, about the clicking stones and the pale shapes and the light that had poured from Vanessa like the sun. That was ours to carry, our secret burden, our private horror. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the clicking. It comes from the walls of our house, from the space between sleep and waking, from that thin place where the never-born wait in the dark. Click, 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 click. A patient rhythm, a reminder that some debts can never be fully paid. Vanessa hears it too. I know she does. I see her flinch at random sounds, see her turn toward empty corners of rooms like she's spotted movement there. Sometimes I find her in the bathroom at 3 a.m., staring at her reflection in the mirror, checking to make sure she's alone, that nothing's looking back from the other side. We sold the RV 3 months later, took a huge loss on it, but neither of us could stand to look at it anymore. The couple who bought it were young, probably in their late 20s with a golden retriever and matching smiles. They were planning to drive cross-country, they said, really explore America's wild places. I should have warned them. Should have told them to avoid certain forests, certain clearings, certain places where the boundary between worlds grows thin. But what could I say? That some campgrounds aren't meant for the living? That some silences hide things with stone teeth? So I said nothing. I shook the husband's hand, accepted their check, and watched them drive away in our haunted RV. Maybe they'd be fine. Maybe whatever had infected that vehicle had stayed behind in Kisachi, bound to that spiral of stones. Maybe it only fed on the specific grief Vanessa and I had brought with us. Or maybe, somewhere down the road, on some dark night in some forgotten patch of wilderness, they'd hear the clicking start. Sometimes I think about going back, about returning to that clearing in Kisachi to see if the stones are still there, arranged in their spiral pattern, about looking for proof that it really happened, that we didn't imagine it all. But I know I never will. Some places are doors that, once opened, can never be fully closed. Some forests never let you leave, even when you physically escaped. The thing that haunts me most isn't the creatures themselves or even that terrible night of terror. It's the small one, the one that reached for Vanessa with infant hands. Because when I close my eyes, when I let myself really remember, I can see its face with perfect clarity. And it looked exactly like the ultrasound photo we'd kept on our refrigerator for those brief, hopeful weeks before everything went wrong. Our son. Not the potential of our son, not the ghost of what might have been, but him, fully formed, fully real, reaching for his mother from the other side of existence, reaching and being refused, pushed away by the same light that had saved us. I wonder sometimes if Vanessa understands what she did when she summoned that light. If she realizes that she rejected him twice, once in the womb and once in that clearing, when he'd finally found a way to reach her and she'd burned him away like morning mist. I wonder if that's what the clicking means. Not a threat, but a question, asked over and over in a language we're not equipped to answer. Why? Why didn't you want me? Why wasn't I enough? I wonder if we'll ever stop hearing it. Vanessa says she wants to try again, to get pregnant, to have another baby. She says it with a brightness in her eyes that scares me, a manic edge that wasn't there before Kisachi. She says this time will be different, that she's ready now, that she understands what she threw away. But I've seen what's in her mirror when she doesn't know I'm watching. I've seen the small pale shape that stands behind her sometimes, its mouth opening and closing in that familiar clicking rhythm. I've seen the way she tilts her head when she thinks she's alone, like she's listening to something I can't hear. I think part of her stayed in those woods, or maybe part of those woods came home with her. Either way, she's different now. We both are. We're marked, changed, forever altered by what we saw and what we learned about ourselves in that clearing where the never-born dance on nights when the moon is dark. So when she talks about trying again for a baby, I smile and nod and say all the right things. But deep down, in the place where truth lives, I know we never will, because I understand now what she doesn't, or what she does but won't admit. Those things in the forest weren't just random spirits or demons. They were consequences. They were the physical manifestation of guilt and grief given form by something ancient and hungry that lives in the thin places of the world. And if we have another child now, after what happened, after what we know, what would we be bringing that child into? What would be waiting for them in the dark corners of their nursery, clicking stones together in patient rhythm, teaching them the language of the never-born? Some nights I dream I'm back in that clearing. The RV is gone and I'm standing alone in the spiral of stones, watching pale shapes emerge from the forest. They circle me, clicking their teeth, and I understand they've been waiting for me to come back, waiting for me to understand. In the dream, the smallest one approaches. It opens its mouth, too many teeth, grinding like millstones, and speaks in a voice I recognize because I've imagined it 1,000 times. The voice my son would have had if he'd lived to learn words. "Daddy," it says, the sound emerging from between stone teeth. "Why didn't you protect me?" And I have no answer. None that would satisfy. None that would change anything. I wake from these dreams with Vanessa's name on my lips, reaching for her across the bed. Sometimes she's there. Sometimes she's not. Sometimes I find her standing at the window, looking out at our dark backyard, her lips moving silently as if counting or praying or responding to questions only she can hear. Click, 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 click. The rocks in our garden have started moving. I notice it in small ways. A stone by the patio that was definitely near the bird bath yesterday. A piece of decorative granite that's migrated from the front yard to the back. Vanessa says I'm imagining it, that I'm still traumatized from our camping trip and seeing patterns that aren't there. But I've started marking them with paint on the underside, and every morning more of them are out of place. Every morning the spiral grows a little larger, a little more defined. Every morning we're a little closer to having our own clearing, our own thin place, right here in suburban normalcy. I thought we'd escaped Kasachi. I thought surviving that night meant we'd won. But I understand now that some things don't end just because you drive away. Some forests are portable. Some hauntings don't need a specific location. They only need the haunted. The rocks in our yard click together at night. Vanessa pretends not to hear them. I pretend to believe her pretending. And somewhere, in the space between what is and what might have been, our son waits in a clearing of stones, practicing the only word he'll ever need.